to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Thursday, the 16th of May.
Keir Starmer unveils his six-step pledge card to change Britain. But does it have the power of Tony Blair's five-step pledge card or Ed Miliband's six-point stone of doom?
Parasite outbreak. Panicked residents have been told to boil their water before drinking it due to contaminated taps. We're live in Devon to find out more.
And are doctors being forced to choose between patient safety or their jobs? Claims that NHS bosses are destroying the careers of whistleblowers. We speak to one man on the front line.
And today marks 81 years since the bold, heroic flight of the Dam Busters. We'll be live with RAF heroes on a 300-mile journey to honour those who lost their lives and kept us safe.
What are we talking about here?
We are looking forward to that. It is a marvellous film, but also a marvellous story of the Dam Busters, of what they did, of the Nazi infrastructure they took out. And 81 years today. It's all in the run-up to the 80th anniversary of D-Day, which, of course, is coming on the 6th of May, only a couple of weeks away.
Yes, and these cyclists on this 300-mile journey, one of our reporters is going to be there live on the scene interviewing them, see how they feel after such a journey. And, of course, this is all in memory of those who lost their lives for our future, essentially.
Well, it was the most remarkable mission of technological progress, the bouncing bomb, but also bravery and heroism. And it is well worth remembering. If you have any stories, if you remember the first time you were when you learnt about the dam busters, please do write in, gbnews.com/your say.
Yes, because unfortunately, quite a lot of young people, according to these surveys that we've been doing, don't have a clue.
No.
No clue at all.
There is the risk that sort of this memory gets lost.
Yeah.
That really what became sort of the foundation of modern Britain in many ways, that formative experience of the Second World War, is to some extent slipping away. It's very important that it doesn't die with the generation who are sadly moving on now, who fought in that war.
Absolutely. Have we become a bit ignorant of our own history? gbnews.com/your say. Let's get the headlines with Aaron.
Very good morning to you. Good afternoon. In fact, it's 2 minutes past 12. Sir Keir Starmer has claimed stability is change and says that's why it has to be Labour's first step. He's outlined a series of pre-election pledges, which include a new border security command to tackle people smuggling gangs, cutting NHS waiting lists, and a commitment to employ 6,500 new teachers. Labour also plan to set up Great British Energy, a publicly owned power company, and crack down on antisocial behaviour. But Sir Keir says years of decline won't easily be undone.
There's no quick fix to the mess that the Tories have made of this country. But this is a changed Labour Party with a plan to take us forward. And I have ambition for this country. And like all ambition, that starts with first steps. First steps towards higher growth, an NHS back on its feet, secure borders, cheaper bills, safer streets and opportunities for your children.
This news just in: a 6-year-old boy has died after falling from an apartment block in East London. It's understood the child fell from the upper floor of a building in Plaistow shortly before 6 a.m. The death's being treated as unexpected, and authorities are working to establish the full circumstances. Now, a man has been arrested and charged with attempted murder after Slovakia's Prime Minister was shot several times yesterday. The suspected attacker is a 71-year-old former security guard. He's posted anti-government views on social media. Slovakia's Interior Minister believes the attack was politically motivated. Now, Robert Fico is a known admirer of both Vladimir Putin and Hungary's authoritarian leader Viktor Orban. He scaled back support for Ukraine recently and promotes a nationalistic, anti-Western rhetoric. Thousands of Slovakians have protested against his policies. Well, Mr Fico underwent surgery in this hospital overnight. Deputy Prime Minister Robert Kalinak says his condition's improving.
Over the course of the night, the doctors have managed to stabilise the patient's condition, and at this moment, further procedures are underway that should improve his condition. The situation is very serious.
The Education Secretary says controversial changes to sex education will still allow children to have explore ideas and have contested debates. The government's outlined proposals that would ban sex ed for children under the age of 9. The guidelines, which are subject to a 9-week consultation, also recommend children aren't taught about the concept of gender identity. Gillian Keegan says it's important that parents are fully in the picture and gender ideology is not taught as fact.
We're also making it crystal clear that it should be transparent to parents, and parents should be able to see the materials. They are the first educators of their children, so they should be able to see what's also going on in school. And we're also on top of our gender questioning guidance, which we published for consultation earlier on. We're also making it very clear that gender identity is a contested view and should not be taught as fact.
Causing death or injury by dangerous cycling is to become a new offence, punishable by up to 14 years in prison. MPs have voted in favour of an amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill, which is making its way through Parliament, following campaigning by Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. The former Tory leader says the change is urgent and not anti-cycling. However, critics have pointed out more people are killed by cattle every year or lightning, and that laws already exist to prosecute dangerous cyclists. It will apply to incidents involving pedal cycles, e-bikes, e-scooters and e-unicycles. A game-changing weapons system that can instantly disable swarms of hostile drones is being developed. The cutting-edge drone killer uses radio waves to target and scramble the electronics of enemy drones and can take down multiple hostile targets at once. It could offer significant protection from the kind of attack drones currently being used by President Putin's forces. It's part of efforts to respond to the Defence Secretary's call to put the UK's defence industry on a war footing. Well, the presidents of Russia and China claim their deepening diplomatic ties are stabilising the world, and they've called for a political solution to the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin was greeted by Xi Jinping with full military honours on a two-day state visit to Beijing. Their third meeting in just over a year comes less than a week after Russia launched a new offensive in northeastern Ukraine. Vladimir Putin says their strategic relationship's not opportunistic or directed against other countries, although China has long been suspected of supporting Russia's economy and its invasion of Ukraine. Well, for the latest, you can sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen. Our website also has the details. Now it's over to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. Now, today is the 81st anniversary of the infamous, or indeed rather more famous, dam busters raid that took place during the Second World War. Heroic, I should say.
Heroic, indeed. However, the mission to destroy dams in the heart of Nazi Germany came at a great cost. 53 airmen died in the attack, including the crew led by Dingy Young, who was shot down just moments from safety.
And this week, a team of RAF cyclists have been riding 300 miles from their base at RAF Digby in Lincolnshire to a war memorial in the Netherlands, which marks the place that the crew perished.
Yes, well, let's go straight to the Netherlands now and speak to our reporter, Will Hollis. Will, a big day.
Yes, well, the memorial service here at the beach on Castricum on Zee on the Dutch coastline has just started. We've been talking about the cyclists that have ridden 300 miles from the International Bomber Command Centre in Lincoln over the course of this week. For the last week, they've been wearing cycling jerseys. Now you can see them in their Royal Air Force uniform, and Wing Commander Neil Hallett, the station commander of RAF Digby, is speaking right now. It's not just the RAF here that are acknowledging the sacrifice of that dam busters crew led by Melvin Dingy Young. There's also people from the local area that have come down because they know how important this is. There's the International Bomber Command Centre here as well. There are people from the Dutch Royal Air Force as well. And there are quite a lot of people that have come down here specifically to show that this isn't just a British story. The dam busters were a unit of men from 617 Squadron that also featured people from across the Commonwealth. But it is a story that has captured the hearts of the Dutch people, particularly because it was the Dutch people that were eventually freed by operations like Operation Upkeep and Chastise, which took the war to Germany into the industrial heartlands. 3 German dams were the target. 2 of them successfully breached. The Murner Dam, one of those, that was first breached by Dingy Young's team, but it was here on the way back to England that they were shot down by one of the final Dutch batteries. They were going towards the coastline. We're just moving out of the way, sorry, just because there's a van that's trying to get through. This is the thing with everyday life. Even for a memorial service, regular people still need to do their job. So we just step into the side for one moment with our camera operator. But you can see how fantastic the Royal Air Force look. They say it's been an emotional journey coming from the International Bomber Command Centre in Lincoln, but this is the finish line. The reason that we're here today is because this is where the air crew from 617 Squadron, Dingy Young's crew, died. But they've brought with them a set of silhouettes you can see here on the dune side, and that represents the men of dams and art installation that took part in the 80th anniversary last year. This is the 81st anniversary. You're going to see a lot more installations like this because a number of them are going to be put on the D-Day coastline to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Now, in a few moments' time, there's going to be a piped performance of the last post, and then shortly after the Dutch Air Force are going to be taking a fly past 2 F-35s. It was Lancaster bombers that were used during the attack on the dams, the dam buster raids, but today it's 2 F-45s that are going to be flying past in honour of that sacrifice.
It is a very, very moving occasion, of course, Will, but also I suppose there's a sense of heroism here, of a job well done. This was, after all, a successful mission that, and the sacrifice of these men saved so many more lives.
Yes, well, it was 19 Lancasters that flew out from RAF Scampton 81 years ago today. They were heading to the German heartlands, the industrial heartlands, where there were factories, where people lived and worked on the German war machine. And it's thought that countless lives were saved by the actions of those men, all picked by the Wing Commander Guy Gibson, VC, who picked the best from the Royal Air Force. And he took them there because he knew that the mission was dangerous and he needed the absolute best. The sacrifice was great. 133 people that went out on those raids, 53 of them never came home. And it is worth reflecting on the fact that without that sacrifice, Britain and its allies would not experience the freedom that we do today.
And I understand, Will, we're expecting the Dutch Air Force to fly past at about 12:30, is that right?
Yes, there's nothing more stirring, is there, than a fly past. We see them and we love them in Britain for events like the King's coronation, for the Queen's Jubilee. It's something that really captures the imagination of regular civilians when they're around people like the RAF, our servicemen and women, and in a short amount of time, 2 very modern jets, the F-35s, will be flying over here, the beach at Castricum-on-Sea. Before, it was Lancasters that were flying to and from those dam buster raids. Today, we've had lots of passenger jets taking, particularly Brits, over to Amsterdam to celebrate in the tourist delights. But in a few moments, it's that really sombre, ceremonial F-35 jets that will be flying over here in Castricum-on-Sea.
Back with you as soon as we see those aeroplanes. Thank you very much, live from the Netherlands, for bringing us all of that.
Well, staying with the World War II commemorations, a second torch lighting event will take place in Cambridge today, following one in Oxford as we approach the 80th anniversary of D-Day.
Yes, the event aims to bring old and young together to pass the torch of commemoration to the next generation, and comes as Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Defence Secretary Grant Shapps are set to join D-Day veterans to mark the historic occasion in June.
Well, we can now go live to Epping and speak to our reporter Ray Addison, who is there for us. Ray, tell us about where you are and what is expected to happen.
Well, yes, I'm in Epping at North Weald Airfield. Now, fighter jets scrambled from here during the Battle of Britain in World War II, and it's now the base of Aero Legends. That's the biggest vintage aviation company in the United Kingdom. In fact, they own this Dakota transport plane that's directly behind me, and that flew during World War II as well. Now, today they've been announcing a series of events to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and I'm joined by the owner, Keith Perkins. Keith, thanks for being here with us. What can you tell us about these events?
Well, they're quite extensive. We've got 5 ground events across the UK and Normandy, a whole programme of round canopy parachuting to emulate the drops that were made in Normandy in 1944, and we've even put on the weather today. This is June 1944 weather. Yeah.
It's hugely expensive, it's massively time-consuming, everything that you do. It's a bit of a passion project for you, I know. Why do we do it? Why do you do it?
Yeah, it's a really good question, but it's part of, I think, an inbuilt thing with us to remember. You know, the freedoms we have today and the sacrifices that were made. Obviously, we fly the aeroplanes a lot, which is a living example of that, but The last time probably that there'll be a number of veterans available to attend the ceremonies, and yeah, it's part of a remembrance programme really for us and a commitment to do so.
Talk to us about the planes that will be taking part in these events.
We've got something like 9 to 11 Dakotas. We've got many coming over from the States. In fact, they're leaving today. It's a week's journey going via Greenland and so on. And we've got a number of fighter planes, Spitfires, Mustangs and so on, that will be providing a wingman for them and creating the sort of ambience of 1944.
You're really battling to keep the memory of D-Day alive in the minds of everyone around the world. How is D-Day perceived in France? How is it perceived by the other Allied nations that took part?
Well, it's obviously a big event in Normandy, and I think there's sometimes mixed emotions because the invasion did a lot of damage. There are a lot of civilian casualties, but still grateful for the beginning of their liberation, really. You know, so it's a big event. Everywhere in Normandy will have some sort of memento or a hark back to 1944, June the 6th. So big event. No one will be under any illusion that it didn't happen there, that's for sure. In terms of, the Allied side, I've said earlier, we don't have Hollywood, so we always underplay the British and Commonwealth involvement, but most people don't understand that most of the troops that went in on D-Day were British and Commonwealth. Hollywood sometimes presents it as an all-American thing, but it certainly wasn't.
Keith, thank you so much. Going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, just simply due to time. But it's really fascinating to hear about these events that you're organising. So as we heard, they're a really busy series of events. Sorry for the noise. We've got the air ambulance over to my left, but a really busy series of events and a clear passion to keep the memory of D-Day alive and all those who made the ultimate sacrifice.
Absolutely marvellous stuff. Ray Edison, thank you so much for bringing us that and that impressive Dakota aircraft behind you. I'm looking forward to seeing some Spitfires, but I don't know. I grew up quite near Duxford Airfield in Cambridgeshire, which does all of these old sort of living memorial wartime plane demonstrations. When I went to school, sometimes you'd look up in the sky and see that there's a Spitfire going by.
But it is so important, what Ray was saying and the man he was with, about how keeping the memory of D-Day alive, making sure future generations understand that crucial part of history, and remembering all of those young men.
Yes.
I mean, what was the average age of the men involved in all of this?
It is remarkable seeing some of the ages, perhaps not the average ages, but, I mean, there are 18-year-olds who went up in the sky. Just things that you couldn't imagine today. Really quite remarkable events that, of course, not just of the 6th of June, but of the years leading up to it as well, as we saw with the daring raids of the dam busters.
Indeed. Well, coming up, we're going to be live in Devon because panicked residents have been told to boil their water before drinking it, and this apparently is due to contaminated taps. We're going to be there talking to residents. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to me to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
and businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare. What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
That has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, times change. You've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Friday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Lee Anderson's Real World at 7. At 8, it's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, Keir Starmer has been out and about today, hasn't he? In Essex this time, launching his six-step pledge plan.
You can tell that it's not a reheat of Tony Blair's five-step pledge card because there's another one, and that's a crucial difference.
It's a crucial difference. And he also plonked in immigration for the first time. That wasn't one of his 5 missions, was it?
It wasn't one of the 5 missions. So, no, you have 5 missions, 6 pledges, 6 steps. I wonder what's going to be next. Shall we cross to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, to try and make some sense of what this really was today? Because, Catherine, a lot of people are saying there wasn't really anything new.
Well, you're quite right, Tom and Emily. We've actually heard all of these pledges before in one form or another. Keir Starmer announced his 5 missions for national renewal, as he likes to say, over a year ago now. But they didn't really cut through with the public. They were a little bit woolly. They didn't cut through in the same way as Rishi Sunak's currently rather ill-fated 5 promises. So they've added one. That's the one concerning this border security command that was announced last week to try to counter illegal immigration. And with the other 5, they've sort of refined them and distilled them down into something that they think is going to resonate with voters. Let's have a look first at what Keir Starmer had to say a little bit earlier.
So here we are. 1 card, 6 steps, in your hand, a plan to change the country. This is a message that we can take to every doorstep across the country, and make that argument. Decline is not inevitable. Politics can make a difference. Britain will have a better future, and you can choose it with Labour.
Yes, saying to voters, this is your choice, it's up to you, change is possible. And I think what a contrast to Rishi Sunak's speech that he made, the Prime Minister, just on Monday behind a lectern at a think tank, talking about how dangerous the world is, talking about security, talking about AI. This had a totally different feel. Sir Keir Starmer, no jacket, no tie, sleeves rolled up, literally centre stage, surrounded on all 4 sides by people, walking around, reading from prompts that were up on screens around the room. A very different feel. I think he's trying to be accessible, trying to be relatable. The Sir in Sir Keir Starmer is a bit of a problem for Labour because a lot of voters just don't really connect with him, don't really quite get him. He hasn't sort of fired them with enthusiasm. So he's trying to be approachable. Labour are aware that although they're 20 points ahead in the polls, a lot of the support for them is really quite soft. Partly this lead is largely because the Conservatives have been in power for 14 years and there's many voters simply very, very fed up with them. What Labour want to do is for people to be voting for them rather than just against something else.
Yes, absolutely. The rolled up sleeves, the rather relaxed look, it is different for Keir Starmer. But of course, comparisons have been made now between Sir Keir Starmer and Tony Blair, who also had his pledges. They were on a little credit card style thing. I think we've got a picture of that available. Ah, there he is. There's Tony Blair with his little card. I think he gave them to all of his colleagues, didn't he? All his MPs, so that they could have it always to hand. And then we also had Ed Miliband, which perhaps was more of a stone of doom here. He unveiled with his 6 better plan, better future. 6 pledges, did he call them?
He called them pledges cast in stone, although people ended up calling it the Ed Stone, which was perhaps a bit of a blunder. There was all sorts of rumour about where this stone ended up, whether it got broken down after the election, whose garden it's plonked in. But Catherine, is this going to end up much more like Tony Blair's successful card or Ed Miliband's slightly less successful slab of doom?
Well, we'll find out with a general election, won't we? But obviously they're 20 points ahead, of course. Things can always change and change fast. But the expectation is that Keir Starmer is going to be heading into government, and they were going to hope that this is going to land well. Of course, there'll be all sorts of focus groups looking into this, seeing what voters made of it. But I thought, the way he used individual people talking about this hospital, that more children were having operations to take their rotten teeth out than anything else, were quite powerful. Also, he was getting a coffee from a service station, and a lady with a ingrowing eyelid was so upset because she's on this endless waiting list. So painting a picture of, he says, a country that is stuck, that is failing in many senses, and saying change is possible with the Labour Party, but saying, this is going to be hard. There's very little money around. We've been on massive spending sprees with the furlough scheme during COVID, with supporting people's energy bills. Whoever gets into power after the next election, there's going to be very, very difficult choices. He was also accused in the questions that followed the press conference by scaling back the ambitions. They said, these are less ambitious than what you promised a year ago. And he said, no, that's not true. It's just that these are the first steps for change, as it says on the billboards that are going to be popping up in target constituencies near you soon. He said these are the first steps, but their plans are much bigger. Let's see if voters are convinced.
Oh, let's see, indeed. Very, very interesting stuff, Catherine. I wonder whether the Tories will come out with a little card with the 5 pledges of Rishi Sunak. Can we remember the 5 pledges of Rishi Sunak? I'm going to try and do this from memory.
Go on, then.
Okay. Cut inflation.
Grow the
economy. Reduce debt. Stop the boats.
Oh, that's not going very well, is it?
And what's the 5th one?
NHS waiting lists.
Cut waiting lists.
Yes, NHS waiting list. Bish, bash,
I'll tell you
bosh.
what, I don't think I could do that with Keir Starmer's 5 pledges.
No, more teachers. That's one of them. Thank you so much, Catherine. Catherine Forster, our political correspondent there. A couple of you have got in touch to say, can Starmer save Britain? Is a bit of a harsh headline we had there, implying that Britain does need saving. Well, Keir Starmer obviously wants us to think that it does.
Yes.
No thoughts on that?
No thoughts on that.
No thoughts on that. Well, coming up, we're going to be live in Cambridge at a protest against the war in Gaza. What exactly is going on with these student activists? Good afternoon, Britain. We're on GB News.
It's 12:31. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer says all 6 of his pre-election pledges are fully funded and achievable within 2 terms of a Labour government. Among the promises are a new border security command to tackle people smuggling gangs, plans to cut NHS waiting lists and to improve economic stability. Sir Keir says Labour has a firm plan for Britain's future.
There's no quick fix to the mess that the Tories have made of this country. But this is a changed Labour Party with a plan to take us forward. And I have ambition for this country. And like all ambition, that starts with first steps. First steps towards higher growth, an NHS back on its feet, secure borders, cheaper bills, safer streets and opportunities for your children.
Well, meanwhile, Conservative Party Chairman Richard Holden says Labour's promises should be taken with a pinch of salt.
Quite clear that Labour don't have a cohesive plan and would take the country back to square one. I have no idea why anybody would believe a word that Keir Starmer says when every single time he's got a different audience to play for, he changes his tune, he changes what he's saying and changes what he says he stands for. You know, with 16 relaunches in a matter of a couple of years, after 4 years in opposition, he's not got a cohesive plan. I think it says everything you need to know about Keir Starmer.
A man's been charged with attempted murder after Slovakia's Prime Minister was shot several times yesterday. The Interior Minister believes the attack was politically motivated. Slovakia has scaled back its support for Ukraine while opening dialogue with Russia. The Prime Minister is understood to be in a critical but stable condition in hospital. A non-executive director of Thames Water has quit after shareholders refused to inject around £3 billion of extra funding. The troubled company's come under increased scrutiny after sewage spills into waterways quadrupled over the past year. It has warned bills could rise by up to 44%. The government says customers should not pay for the company's poor performance. You can sign up to our news alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or by going to our website.
The latest GB News travel.
The southbound side of the M1, all lanes have now reopened at London Gateway services following an earlier accident between Edgware at 4 through to Junction 2 for Five Ways Corner. Northbound on the M1 there's a lane closure though to an accident from 13 for Bedford through to Milton Keynes at 14. Traffic is coping well. On the anti-clockwise side of the M25 there is a lane closure on the exit slip road to Junction 26 to a broken down vehicle. Also a broken down vehicle between Waltham Abbey at 26 to Enfield at 25 and again a lane closure in place to assist. On the northbound side of the M5 there is queue in traffic to an earlier obstruction on the road between 31 for the Oakhampton turnoff through to Exeter at junction 30. It is adding around 15 minutes to your journey, and that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sam Richardson is a singer-songwriter from St Agnes in Cornwall. Much of his music reflects a sense of frustration with life in a coastal town.
We've got a lot of empty shops in a lot of our town centres, which is sort of causing a lot of death on the high street. I know that's a problem everywhere.
Similar problems across the border in Devon. Ilfracombe is the most deprived area in North Devon. Twice the town has applied for levelling up funding. Twice it's been turned down, something North Devon MP Selene Saxby says is frustrating.
It's very complicated. It's not as straightforward as just throwing money at the problem. They're very deep issues.
For several years, the government has acknowledged that rural areas need extra help, but so far that help doesn't stretch to our coasts. The MP for St Austell and Newquay is pushing the government to change all this.
Truly local people are finding it really challenging because we often have sort of low-wage seasonal work, but very high house prices pushed up because of second homes and holiday lets, etc. And also, I think the disparity review that Theresa May carried out when she was Prime Minister highlighted that working-class white boys in coastal communities are some of the most disadvantaged people in the country.
Struggling to get on the housing ladder, struggling to find work, struggling to be heard.
It's interesting that a member of the party that's in government recognises that, which is great, because it is a really important thing. But that government, for the last 10 years, has also cut £500 million in youth services around the country.
No one thinks the problem of coastal deprivation can be solved overnight. The issue of disaffected young white males even harder.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 12:36. Now, South West Water has urged people to boil their tap water after hundreds were struck down with vomiting and stomach pains in a seaside town in Devon.
Residents across Brixham are being told to boil water as a precaution, including when drinking it or using it to cook with or even to brush their teeth. They're boiling this water, but are they boiling with rage? Well, joining us from one of these affected towns is our reporter Jeff Moody. Jeff, this is the most extraordinary story for modern Britain. It sounds like something out of Victorian England.
It really does, doesn't it? The cars have been arriving here bumper to bumper since at least 7 o'clock this morning. I've been here since 7 o'clock and there's been no let-up at all from the cars arriving here to collect free bottles of water. And there is a sense, as you say, of people boiling with rage that this is happening, but also concern. People are very concerned because the ones that are ill are very ill. The diarrhoea is very extreme, it lasts a long time, and it's followed by stomach cramps that some people say are akin to childbirth. It's that painful. So there is a real issue here, and a lot of people are comparing it to COVID. They're saying, look, we're back in this situation again where we don't really understand what's going on. So many people are getting ill. The elderly people are getting ill, but also children too. A significant number of children are falling ill too. The local primary school has closed down. Cafes and restaurants, of course, have closed because they rely very heavily on water, and a lot of other businesses are finding that there's no trade at all because people are staying inside. But also animals are getting affected. We know that this spreads from animals to humans and vice versa. Somebody was telling me earlier on that she had a fish tank, and the other day she changed the water in her fish tank and all her fish died. Somebody else was telling me that her cat is incredibly ill with this. And all the time they don't really know what is going on. There are a lot of anger, of course, for South West Water, who were very late in the day to say that there was a problem. The first person fell ill 12 days ago, and it wasn't until yesterday at 1 p.m. that South West Water actually said, look, don't drink the water. Up until that point they said, no, it's nothing to do with us. It's no problem at all. Yesterday they said, look, you must boil the water if you're going to use water. Try and use bottled water. Don't even clean your teeth with the water too. They've issued an apology, and they've said that they're investigating a local reservoir which actually supplies 40,000 people in the area. So this is a pretty serious state of affairs for most of the people here. Earlier on I caught up with some of the people in the queue, and they told me about their frustration at what's happened.
I was already poorly anyway, and the kids, we've got quite a big family of children, so I've just come to collect for my daughter and for myself. Yeah, so 2 separate households. So that's 8, 9, 10 people altogether.
This is a fantastic piece of organisation, and hopefully we'll get through it as quickly as possible, as soon as they identify the cause of the problem.
Well, South West Water has increased the amount of compensation they're offering. They were offering £15. That now has been increased to £100. But a lot of people are saying, well, you know, that really isn't enough. And the other danger here is that it spreads. We were hearing about a rugby team that came down here and played a game of rugby a couple of days ago. They've now gone back up north and they're all sick there. So the danger is that it spreads out of this area. This really is a situation that could very easily get out of control.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Jeff Moody. Jeff is in Devon for us. Thank you very much. Pretty horrifying, actually, hearing from experts that you can be ill for up to a month with this type of parasite, and hundreds falling ill. I heard that one school has even had to shut down because they don't have access to enough bottled water. They were expecting the company at the heart of this to deliver bottled water for the safety of the children. It didn't come, so they had to close the school.
Although we can all say that how this is terrible, and of course it is. I quite liked the man that Jeff spoke to there in his car, saying what a fantastic piece of organisation this is.
Keep calm.
To get it identified now before it spread beyond the area. I mean, OK, 40,000 people in the area, quite huge, but before it spreads to the whole of Devon, the whole of the southeast, before it spreads much further, it does seem that they're putting a lid on it now. Let's hope that it doesn't escape beyond that and become a wider problem throughout the country.
Yeah, it's not what you expect, is it, really? I mean, I drink tap water all the time. I don't even filter it sometimes, but clearly maybe we all should be.
Living life on the edge.
We are living life on the edge. Anyway, a protest at Cambridge University against the war in Gaza has now spread to a lawn outside Senate House, where graduations usually take place.
Yes, GB News presenter Patrick Christie's has been there today. He joins us now. And Patrick, the weather's not great. Has that dampened the protest?
No, it's not. I'll tell you what's also not particularly great is my connection. So if it's possible, I'll just do a little walk and talk, set the scene. This is the site of the White Horse Inn, OK, known as Little Germany, where Cambridge scholars debated the works of Martin Luther in the early 16th century. This is the birthplace of the Reformation in England. It's an important site. And here we have, if the camera just pans around over my shoulder here, the site of this Cambridge University pro-Palestine encampment. Now, at GB News, we are the home of robust free speech and debate. So what we decided to do earlier on was present these campers with the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. She wanted to come and talk to them, to engage in a debate with them, listen to their demands, find out what was really going on. And none of them particularly wanted to engage. Why did you bottle it when we presented you with the Home Secretary, former Home Secretary? Just out of interest. Why did you bottle it? No, let's keep going. OK, interesting, because this is really a home of academic rigour, isn't it, here at Cambridge University? They've set up their encampment, they've got the signs here. This is liberated land here at Cambridge. OK, they're all in the tents. And then also another concerning aspect to this is that actually one thing that we are seeing are members of university staff taking part in this. Guys, can I just ask as well, just any particular reason why when the actual former Home Secretary was here you decided not to engage at all? I wonder if the people of Palestine might actually want to hear from you. No, nothing. Remarkable, isn't it? So there is a list of demands. One of them is divest now. So they want the university to divest any of its interests in anything they say Israeli, but many people would regard as just being Jewish. They've got a list of things they really need here. This includes vegan and nut-free food. OK, there's a chap here. Hello, sir. Can I ask, why, when the former Home Secretary came, did you decide to bottle it? Did you not want to engage at all, no? No. OK, so this is just one of the sites here at Cambridge University. What about yourself, sir? I'll ask you again. You had a good opportunity. This is an interesting one. So a faculty staff observer. So aren't you a member of staff here at the university? Are you a member of staff here? You all right there, sir? Would you like to talk to us? No? Fine. No, well, people can make their own minds up, can't they, really? But here is their list of demands. Disclose, divest, reinvest and protect. Later on this evening on GB News, on my show, we'll be showing you the footage of what happened when we presented this lot with former Home Secretary Suella Braverman. She will also be live on my show between 9 and 11 p.m.
Wow, very interesting indeed. So you're not going to be, rallying the troops, campaigning for vegan meals, a vegan package. It's a rainy day. You might need to lift their spirits a bit if you want them to talk to you.
No, I won't be doing that, although there is a chop house just around the corner, so I might call in on that one. There's free hot meals here on the site, though, but yeah, make sure you do tune in 9 to 11 p.m. for Patrick Christie's tonight. Suella Braverman, we spent about half an hour walking around here.
Well, Patrick, make sure you go to the Fudge Kitchen. It's just about 20 metres down the road. They'll give you a free sample. Well worth it on King's Parade. Patrick Christys, thank you for joining us. My goodness, quite eerie. It's almost spooky. Sort of these zombie-like people refusing to speak, sort of just bumbling around and sort of ducking away from the camera.
I mean, let's be frank, he was a bit Billy No-Mates there, wasn't he? No one would speak. They were all stunned into silence.
This is King's College, Cambridge, which hangs a hammer and sickle flag in its student bar.
Right.
So that gives you a slight idea of
the type of college.
I mean, if it were to happen at any Cambridge college, you can imagine it happening outside King's.
Well, there you go. He's had a good go. Now, coming up, hundreds of Brits face disrupted or even cancelled holidays. This is after Boeing's safety crisis has led to an aircraft shortage. We'll find out more after this very short break.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some decent warm sunshine for many of us today, but also a spell of heavy, possibly thundery rain pushing its way westwards across central parts. That's in association with a frontal system that's currently just to the east of us. All this then making its way westwards, bringing some torrential downpours perhaps, and also the risk of some thunder. There will also be quite a few showers elsewhere, though across northern areas here it's looking a little bit drier and also quite a bit sunnier, with a good deal of sunshine, particularly across parts of Scotland. It's here we're likely to see the highest temperatures, highs of around 24 or 25 Celsius perhaps, though elsewhere it's going to be a few degrees lower than this. As we go into the evening, we are going to see more heavy rain across central parts of England and Wales. Could cause some problems on the road, so do take care. There's the potential for more than 40 millimetres of rain in just a few hours. Heading further north, though, across Northern Ireland, quite cloudy as we go through the evening. A few showery bursts here. A sunnier story for northern England and much of Scotland, though there will still be 1 or 2 showers around, and these could be a little bit on the heavy side. As we go through the end of the day and into the night, we are going to see the heavy rain across central England and Wales clearing away towards the west, and although there will be a few showery bursts overnight, for most it is going to be largely dry and there will be some clear skies. I'm not expecting temperatures to drop a huge amount, most places holding up in double digits, but there could be a few pockets of mist and fog first thing on Friday morning. Otherwise, as we go through Friday itself, then for many it's actually looking like a largely dry day. Yes, there will still be some showers around, particularly across parts of Scotland, and again here they could turn a little bit on the heavy side, but otherwise a largely dry picture, and again some decent sunshine breaking through. In the sunshine it's going to feel pretty warm. Temperatures a little bit higher than today for many of us, more widely getting into the low 20s Celsius. See you again.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Coming up to 10 to 1. Now, Brits could face hundreds of cancelled flights as a safety crisis at Boeing leads to aircraft shortages.
Yes, just last week, a Boeing 737 of Transair en route to Bamako veered off the runway at Dakar International Airport in Senegal, and 11 passengers were injured. So the question really is, are these planes fit for purpose?
Well, joining us now is John Strickland, aviation consultant and host of Our Future Skies podcast. Thanks for making the time for us, John. This is a pretty concerning story. We've, of course, all saw the, frankly, shocking footage of that Alaska Airlines flight where the panel sort of blew out in the middle of the air, and now this story at Bamco as well. Are these isolated incidents, or is there a theme here with the safety of Boeing aircraft?
We don't know much about the incident that happened in the last couple of weeks in Africa. As you said, it was a shock to everybody, travellers and indeed people in the airline industry, to see about the Alaska inoperative emergency door were detached, and that goes into a whole big history about Boeing and challenges it's facing, having had 2 fatal crashes in the last 4 years with MAX aircraft, which did lead to, sadly, the loss of life of 346 people. A lot going on there culturally to put the company right, including the CEO having stood down, other senior managers standing down. But the issue in terms of what this means for British travellers this summer, in terms of capacity, actually it plays out somewhat differently. Boeing has got delivery delays, partly because of these organisational challenges and putting right the issues that led to those 2 fatal crashes. Some airlines will receive aircraft late this summer. The one that is most affected in terms of British travellers is Ryanair, which of course is a very large airline. They've got about 550 aircraft, but they now find themselves maybe short by about 17 this summer because of Boeing delivery delays. But they've taken actions already. Flights that were due to operate with that capacity have already been cancelled and taken off sale. Passengers will predominantly have been rebooked or been given the option to make rebookings. We then see on the Airbus side, the other big manufacturer of aircraft, an aircraft they produce called the Airbus A321. Some of those are powered by an American engine made by the company Pratt & Whitney, and those engines have proved to be not delivering the reliability and service that was expected. It's a massive headache for them as a manufacturer and operators of that type. Aircraft with those engines are having to be grounded for engine repairs or replacements. So that could take up to a year per aircraft. Now, the main airline in terms of the UK that is affected there is Wizz Air. They find themselves, in terms of what they've last published, with maybe 40 aircraft short of what they planned this summer. It's a different position for Ryanair. It means Ryanair is still growing, but not as much as planned. Wizz Air simply cannot grow. And again, they've largely taken the actions. A number of UK airports have seen aircraft taken out and routes cancelled. So the big travel groups used by UK travellers, I don't think are going to see much, if any, effect here on in. It's going to be smaller players, probably predominantly customers in other markets from the UK who will have more pain.
Well, that's good news. I mean, you mentioned 2 very popular budget airlines, I think it's fair to say, Ryanair and Wizz Air, but you think they're going to be OK? They're going to be able to find enough aircraft to keep their very, very busy summer schedule?
Wizz has just said we cannot grow. They plan to grow double-digit this summer. They've just had to accept, and it's a big pain for them financially, they cannot grow. So they put a lid on capacity and already cancelled flights out. Ryanair will hear their financial results on Monday. I'm sure there'll be a lot of heated words from Michael O'Leary about these aircraft not being delivered and the relatively late time in which they had to cancel. They're not going into the summer and still hand-to-mouth cancelling. They've done the necessary work. EasyJet, who reported their half-year financial results today, said they're getting all the aircraft they expect this summer from Airbus. Jet2, of course, another big airline focused on holidays, they've said they expect the capacity as planned. And I think that pretty well the same will be the case.
We know how vocal the Ryanair boss is sometimes, so he'll probably let us all know. Thank you so much for joining us, John Strickland, aviation consultant. We're going to be back in just a tick with Queen Camilla and Prince William. They are out and about.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It will turn mostly dry overnight and it will be dry for many of us tomorrow. But before then, we do have some heavy rain around at the moment, currently across central parts. That's been driven by an area of low pressure that is pushing its way westwards, and that's then pushing the heavy rain westwards as we go through the end of the day. So it is going to clear away, but before then, we could have some heavy rain, particularly as we go through this evening's rush hour, could cause some problems on the road. Otherwise, Otherwise, we are likely to see most places turning dry overnight, although just a few spots of rain where the clouds thick enough across some northern parts of England, perhaps. There will be some clear skies, but temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, so for many it is going to be a relatively mild start to the day on Friday morning, minima of around 11 and 12 Celsius for most places. If we look at the details for tomorrow morning and across Scotland, it's a largely fine start. Plenty of sunshine here, though perhaps towards the Western Isles a bit more cloud and some outbreaks of rain. Also a bit more cloud across southern parts of Scotland and into Northern Ireland and northern England too, and this cloud could bring a few outbreaks of rain first thing tomorrow morning, but nothing especially heavy. Heading further south across the rest of England and Wales, lots of fine sunny weather to be had, but some mist and fog patches possible across parts of the southeast. Any mist and fog, though, will quite quickly clear tomorrow morning, and for many, tomorrow actually looks like a largely fine day. Yes, there will be some showers around, but these will be quite hit and miss, so most places are likely to avoid them. But the showers across parts of Scotland, particularly central Scotland, could turn heavy and possibly thundery. With some decent sunshine around, temperatures for many are likely to be a little bit higher than today, more widely getting into the low 20s Celsius, so feeling pretty warm in that sunshine too. More fine weather to come across northern parts as we go into the weekend, but further south it's looking quite showery, especially on Saturday, perhaps fewer showers on Sunday. Temperatures still above average for the time of year, so feeling warm in any sunshine.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
I'm Charles. I'm on £18,000 cash. It was just amazing, and as soon as it goes into your bank account, it just changed. It's a life-changing thing. Just go for it. It's an absolute must. You must try and go for it.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Between 1955 and 1989, an average of 55 nuclear tests were conducted across the globe each year. More than 30,000 young British and Commonwealth servicemen served at British test locations in Australia and the Pacific Ocean. But in the years since, those who were involved say they've been ignored and lied to about their exposure to radiation. For decades, Lab Rats International has represented the millions across the world exposed to fallout from the testing programmes and the families who still suffer today from illness and deformities. Last year, the government unveiled the Nuclear Test Medal, recognising the military, civilian and overseas staff and personnel who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme in the 1950s. But for Lab Rats founder Alan Owen, whose own father was a nuclear test veteran, the work is only just beginning. In September, they launched a legal challenge to the Ministry of Defence to provide the test veterans full medical records, which they say they've been denied access to.
We sit in this bubble as the nuclear test veteran community, fighting against the establishment. And they will say, you know, ministers will go in Parliament and say, all you've got to do is apply for your medical records and they'll give them to you. You know, it just doesn't happen. It's not a reality. They're not there to as easy, as accessible as just applying. They will fight you all the way. They will delay it.
In response, a government spokesperson said, "We are grateful to all service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme, which is why we have formally recognised them with an official medal. Nuclear test veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pension Scheme." The fight for these veterans and their families lives on, because thousands who came before never got the recognition and justice for their service.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 16th of May.
Are doctors being forced to choose between patient safety and their own jobs. It comes with claims that NHS bosses are destroying the careers of whistleblowers. We're going to speak to one man on the front line.
And Keir Starmer unveils his 6-step pledge card to change Britain. But does it have the power of Tony Blair's 5-step pledge card or Ed Miliband's 6-point Stone of Doom?
Parasite outbreak. Panicked residents have been told to boil their water before drinking it due to contaminated taps. We're going to be live in Devon to find out more. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch about this extraordinary story from Devon about all of this contaminated water, the worries it could be spreading around as well. gbnews.com/your say is how to get in touch. And Judith has written in to say, South West Water needs to explain. This happening in Britain 2024 is beyond disgraceful.
Yes, you don't expect your tap to be contaminated with something that could leave you ill for up to a month. John says these water companies have 2 jobs only: supply us with clean tap water and deal with the sewage. Great job, people. Can I sense a bit of sarcasm there, John?
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Karen says, my dog prefers bottled water. Tells me all I need to know. Your dog seems to be a very pampered pooch.
Pampered pooch. Diva dog. Lynn says, you know the advert for third world countries pay £3 a month to help clean their water supplies? That will be us soon. Oh, well, there you go. Very PC from Lynn.
I'm just looking forward to Paul Kagame getting out on the television in Rwanda and going, please spare some money for the poor people in the United Kingdom who clearly need our aid and our charity.
But, you know, there are a lot of people in the South West, in Devon, who are keeping calm and carrying on, as we heard from Jeff Moody, who was there talking to people. One chap said, you know, everything's organised, we're getting our bottled water.
It was the leader of one African country who, during our foot and mouth crisis, organised a food collection to be sent to Britain, and Britain rejected it. And no one could really work out if it was trying to make a political point or genuinely the leader of an African country trying to help out the UK.
I'd have to know which country.
And I'd
have to know which leader.
I'm going to find this out.
We'll get back to you on it
after the headlines. But shall we return to that in just a few minutes after your headlines with Aaron?
Good afternoon to you. It's 2 minutes past 1. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Sir Keir Starmer has claimed stability is change, and that's why it has to be Labour's first step. He's outlined a series of pre-election pledges, which include a new border security command to tackle the gangs behind small boat crossings, cutting NHS waiting lists, and a commitment to employ 6,500 new teachers. Labour also plans to set up Great British Energy, a publicly owned power firm, and crack down on antisocial behaviour. But Sir Keir says years of Conservative decline won't easily be undone.
There's no quick fix to the mess that the Tories have made of this country. But this is a changed Labour Party with a plan to take us forward. And I have ambition for this country. And like all ambition, that starts with first steps. First steps towards higher growth, an NHS back on its feet, secure borders, cheaper bills, safer streets and opportunities for your children.
Well, Conservative Party Chairman Richard Holden says Labour's promises should be taken with a pinch of salt.
Quite clear that Labour don't have a cohesive plan and would take the country back to square one. I have no idea why anybody would believe a word that Keir Starmer says when every single time he's got a different audience to play for, he changes his tune, he changes what he's saying and changes what he says he stands for. You know, with 16 relaunches in a matter of a couple of years, after 4 years in opposition, he's not got a cohesive plan. I think it says everything you need to know about Keir Starmer.
A 6-year-old boy has died after falling from an apartment block in East London. It's understood the child fell from the upper floor of a building in Plaistow shortly before 6 a.m. The death is being treated as unexpected and authorities are working to establish the full circumstances. The Prime Minister has defended the government's controversial changes to sex education. Rishi Sunak says parents should know what their children are being taught in schools and sex education should come at an appropriate time. The new proposals would ban it for children under the age of 9 and would recommend the concept of gender identity is not part of the curriculum. The Education Secretary says gender ideology should not be taught as fact.
We're also making it crystal clear that it should be transparent to parents, and parents should be able to see the materials. They are the first educators of their children, so they should be able to see what's also going on in school. And we're also on top of our gender questioning guidance, which we published for consultation earlier on. We're also making it very clear that gender identity is a contested view and should not be taught as fact.
A man's been charged with attempted murder after Slovakia's Prime Minister was shot several times yesterday. The suspected attacker is a 71-year-old poet and former security guard. Speaking moments ago, the Interior Minister said the attack was politically motivated and the suspect had cited the government's policies on the media as a possible motive. Now, Robert Fico is a noted admirer of both Vladimir Putin and Hungary's authoritarian leader Viktor Orban. He scaled back support for Ukraine and promotes a nationalistic, anti-Western rhetoric. Thousands of Slovakians have protested against his policies. A game-changing weapons system that can instantly disable swarms of hostile drones is being developed. The cutting-edge drone killer uses radio waves to target and scramble the electronics of enemy drones and can take down multiple hostile targets at once. It could offer significant protection from the kind of attack drones being used by President Putin's forces in Ukraine. It's part of efforts to respond to the Defence Secretary's call to put the UK's defence industry on a war footing. And Britain has asked China to push for an end to Russia's war in Ukraine as Vladimir Putin visits Beijing. The Russian president was greeted by Xi Jinping with full military honours for their third meeting in just over a year. It comes less than a week after Russia launched a fresh offensive in northeastern Ukraine. China has long been suspected of supporting Russia's economy and its invasion of Ukraine. For the latest, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. The QR code's on your screen. The details are also at gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 1. Now, Sir Keir Starmer today has been out and about making his pitch to the country, campaigning as he ramps up to this year's general election.
Yes, among Labour's promises are a new border security command to tackle people smuggling gangs and pledges to cut NHS waiting lists and recruit more teachers. Now, the Labour leader insists all the commitments are fully costed, but the Conservatives have hit back, saying Starmer is on his 16th relaunch and has no coherent plan. So, should we get the thoughts now of the former Labour MP, Bill Rammell? Bill, great to have you on the show. Let's go with that costed element here, because I'm just reading the detail on this, and he says he's going to cut NHS waiting times, 40,000 more appointments each week during evenings and weekends. That might be tough with the unions, but he says it's going to be paid for by cracking down on tax avoidance and non-dom loopholes. Now, that's open to difference of interpretation, really, and also analysis there. You've got economists saying, on the one hand, that actually you're not going to get that much money from closing down these non-dom loopholes, and tax avoidance, well, you know, the government does its best to try and crack down on that anyway. So is it true to say that this is really costed, Bill?
Yes, it is. There's been detailed analysis. If you look, for example, at the non-dom changes the government has brought in, there's numerous loopholes that can be plugged to raise additional revenue. The commitment for 6,500 extra teachers is going to be paid for by ending the tax breaks for private schools. 13,000 new police officers. But what was really important about the launch this morning, and I was in the room, is that we've needed for some time a kind of pledge card to synthesize, to distill the commitments that we're making for the early years of a Labour government, the tangible, credible policies that will make a difference to people's lives.
But Bill, where's the evidence though on this costing? I mean, really, cracking down on non-dom loopholes. You know as well as I do that many people are increasingly mobile around the world. If people are taxed too much, they can easily move elsewhere and, you know, benefit from lower tax rates. You've got the tax breaks for private schools. Where's the evidence, really, that that's going to boost the coffers enough to recruit 6,500 new teachers? Are you sure these aren't, you know, exaggerations and, frankly, lies?
No, they're absolutely not. And one of the hallmarks of this changed Labour Party under Keir's leadership with Rachel Reeves as Shadow Chancellor is we've been absolutely scrupulous in not promising more than we can deliver. And, you know, the critics will come at us from another angle saying you're not promising enough. Each of these proposals, and there's reputable economic analysis to back this up, are costed and will deliver for us.
I mean, Bill, taxes are going to have to rise across the board, aren't they, really, to fund all of this? Unless there's astronomical economic growth, and Keir Starmer's only saying he's going to deliver economic stability, not astronomical growth, then there are going to have to be tax rises across the board.
No, I mean, this is part of the way that the Labour Party has changed. We're really appalled and shocked that we've got the highest tax burden since the Second World War, and we know we can't deliver improved public services through additional taxes. How it will come about is through economic growth with a significant commitment to infrastructure spending, to house building. And, you know, don't judge politicians on what they say, judge them on what they do. The difference between the last Labour government and this Conservative government is about £150 billion in terms of more economic growth under the last Labour government compared to this one. And it's economic growth by the changes that we will bring about that will generate the funds that are needed to improve beyond these limited changes to make the further advances and changes that we need.
OK, yeah. This Great British Energy, this publicly owned clean power company, how much do you reckon that's going to cost? And what evidence is there to suggest that it's going to be a success? Because at the moment, the Labour Party is planning to pay for it with a windfall tax on oil and gas giants. I mean, they're already taxed through the roof. So, I mean, where's the evidence that's going to be cost-effective? It's just, you know, a bit of branding, isn't it, really?
It's not branding, Emily. If you look at the amount of money that the utilities have been making, there is scope for additional windfall taxes. And by creating that Great British Energy Company, publicly owned, to work effectively to bring down our energy bills, has to be part of the way forward, and also supporting the green jobs that we need for the future to grow our economy. As I say,
Bill, just on that point, yeah. What level is Labour proposing to raise the windfall tax at? It was first introduced at 60%. It then went up to 80%. You're suggesting 90%, 99%? I mean, what level is Labour going to tax these businesses?
No, I don't believe it's going that high. I've not seen the
It's already
detail.
at 80%.
Yeah, well, yeah, but there is scope for additional, because, you know, the utility companies, as energy bills have gone up, have made extortionate profits, and they've made them above and beyond the increase in energy prices that have come about as a result of domestic and global events. And I think most reasonable people...
Do you think that taxing the production of more energy is going to raise prices or lower prices? Because I put it to you that you're a smart guy, you get the sort of economics of supply and demand. If you're pretty punitive towards the companies that are doing the pumping, you're going to get less stuff, and less stuff to sell means higher prices.
Do you know what? In the run-up to 1997, and there were real echoes of this today in terms of the pledge cards, one of the commitments we made in 1997 was a windfall tax on the privatised utilities to get 250,000 people, young people, off benefit and into work. And Labour politicians were doing similar interviews to this at that stage and were said, this is punitive, it's not going to raise the funds. And we absolutely did that. Not only did we do that, but we went further. And I'm confident, being fiscally
That was a 23%
responsible...
windfall tax, Bill Rammell. That was 23%.
Yeah.
We've already got an 80% windfall tax on energy.
And the privatised utilities in the run-up to 97 hadn't made quite the profits which the energy companies have made over recent years. And there is scope for this, and there's credible analysis that backs that up.
Yeah, I guess the worry is whether these pledges are costed and whether it's just, the same old taxing of wealth and productivity and all that. But I guess the proof may be in the pudding. We'll see. Bill, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for that back and forth. Bill Rammell, former Labour MP. Yes, I'm not sure about this costing.
Yeah, I think sometimes the
taxing non-doms, is it really going to raise as much as they hope? Is it? Or is it actually going to lose money?
Jeremy Hunt, in the last budget, announced a tax on non-doms.
Yeah. It's another tax.
Are they going to double the tax? I mean, what are they going to do?
It's closing the loopholes.
You can't just pretend they're a loophole. I mean, Jeremy Hunt literally announced this, and then Labour had to come up with new ideas in terms of how to.
Well, to be fair, the Conservatives didn't they take the extra windfall tax off Labour's pledges?
They did.
Anyway, they're all swapping and changing their policies.
But the thing is, if it's already happened, that's not new money.
Yeah.
You're going to have to find somewhere to cut in order to spend that money again.
Well, tax breaks for private schools, getting rid of those. There you go, sorted.
Oh, and so many children then go into the state sector because that's going to be completely free.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Vladimir Putin has been greeted by Xi Jinping with full military honours. Shall I try that again?
Yeah, go on.
Vladimir Putin was greeted by Xi Jinping with full military honours as he arrived for a 2-day state visit to Beijing.
Yes, this is their third meeting in just over a year. And comes less than a week after Russia launched a new offensive in northeastern Ukraine. Now, Russia and China's leaders say their deepening diplomatic relations are making the world a safer place. But how worried should the West really be seeing these images? Let's pose that question to senior consulting fellow at Chatham House, Keir Giles. Keir, watching the meeting between these two leaders, can't help but feel a little unsettled. What's your assessment here?
I think anybody that doesn't feel unsettled probably hasn't been paying attention, I'm sad to say. And that's not so much about this meeting, but it's about what it represents and the context it's happening in. You have an aggressive state that is waging a genocidal assault on the other end of Europe. And of course, it's backed by a coalition of other countries that are quite content to see this happen. Foremost among them, of course, China, which is fueling Russia's war machine and tolerating the disruption and damage that it's causing around the world. Meanwhile, of course, you've got the UK and other Western European countries belatedly realizing that their hollowed out armed forces and completely non-existent civil defense isn't really ready for the challenge when Russia has settled the situation in Ukraine to its satisfaction and moves on to its next target. So yes, unsettling, partly because it shows that China is still tolerating what Russia is doing and will still allow it to happen.
Keir, does this feed into what Rishi Sunak spoke about at the start of this week, this axis of evil between Russia, China, Iran and North Korea, all working together to destabilise the world?
Well, there are a lot of names that have been thrown at this coalition of countries that are currently happy to stand with Russia and are actually sending ammunition and supplies in so that it can launch them at Ukraine. It is an axis of convenience as well, because, of course, they have a shared interest in bringing down the West. And that's what we should really be concerned about, the fact that they have coalesced around this idea that the more damage you do to countries like the UK, Europe, North Atlantic area, the better it will be for all of them.
Yes, Vladimir Putin saying Russia is very grateful for China's help in trying to find a solution to the war in Ukraine. I mean, what is he talking about there? What is this, the way in which China is trying to help him with the war?
Well, Russia should be very grateful overall because, of course, it is Chinese tolerance and China actually supplying so much to Russia for its war machine that is actually allowing Russia to continue doing what it is. Now, that statement was about the so-called Chinese peace plan, this 12-point plan that China kind of came out with in the middle of last year, to proposing a kind of settlement for the Ukraine conflict. It's a bit of a misnomer. It's not really a peace plan. It's really how China feels about the war. And it's not all on Russia's side. It also calls for things like territorial integrity, respecting the UN Charter, safeguarding nuclear plants, preserving grain exports. So that is a direct criticism of what Russia was doing at the time. But yet, Putin is absolutely desperate for Chinese support to continue. So he's going to gloss over that, and he's going to pretend that everything continues to be rosy in that relationship between Moscow and Beijing.
And he's telling the world that that together, China and Russia are upholding the principles of justice and a democratic world order. It's doublespeak, isn't it, really?
Well, as ever, you have to hold up a mirror and look at it. What is the exact reverse of what they're saying? And then it starts to make sense in exactly the same way that one of the justifications that Putin used for launching this full-scale invasion of Ukraine was that Russia had tried to preserve Ukrainian territorial integrity. It only makes sense if you look at it through the looking glass.
Wow. Well, what a concerning meeting of convenience and perhaps new axis that is being created of trade and cooperation between China and Russia. Keir Giles of Chatham House, thank you so much for talking us through it. I have to say,
Putin stands there saying, we uphold together justice and democracy, or the democratic world order.
I did mention that an African leader once offered food aid to the United Kingdom at the top of this hour.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah. I believe it was Idi Amin in the 1970s, who was, of course, running Uganda at the time. Sort of did it in a sarcastic way, but there we go.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I'll remember that for the next pub quiz. Anyway, cyclists could face tougher punishments for killing or seriously injuring pedestrians. There's a bit of a row over this. Some cyclists think it's much too much. We'll be debating this very shortly with someone who goes by the name of Britain's most hated cyclist. Gosh.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Rishi Sunak has come out fighting and declared war on what he's called the UK's sick note culture. The country's welfare state bill costs the average taxpayer now £2,000 every single year for every British taxpayer. Astonishing numbers, Catherine, simply mind-bending. 69 billion quid every year now goes on benefits. I paid my tax bill last month. Where did your tax go? I clicked on it. Long-term sickness and benefits is now second only to the NHS on what we spend our tax pound on. This is simply unsustainable.
That's exactly what the Prime Minister said. 69 billion a year on long-term sick and disability benefits, projected to rise to 90 billion by the end of the next Parliament if nothing has done. As he said, it is totally, totally unsustainable. And the message from Rishi Sunak really is, tough love. You're going to take your medicine. It's going to be good for you. You may not like it. Let's have a look at what he had to say earlier.
Everyone with the potential should be supported. And not just to earn, but to contribute and belong. And we must never tolerate barriers that hold people back from making their contribution and from sharing in that sense of self-worth that comes from feeling part of being something bigger than ourselves. And that is why this is a moral mission, and why the value of work is so central to my vision for welfare reform.
Certainly, Rishi Sunak said in the speech, in the period since the pandemic, something has gone wrong. Of course, millions of people had their wages paid by furlough. Now, that was an entirely artificial situation in an exceptional circumstance, but quite a lot of people left the workplace and simply haven't come back.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 1. Now, cyclists could face tougher punishments for killing or seriously injuring pedestrians as a leading Conservative MP puts forward plans for new legislation.
Yes, under the proposal, cyclists could face equal punishments as drivers and potentially face prison time for reckless cycling. So today we are debating if this is fair. Question being, should cyclists face the same punishments as drivers?
Well, joining us is someone who's been described as Britain's most hated cyclist, Dave Sherry, who believes that cyclists should not be held accountable for things that are beyond their control. We've also got motoring journalist Danny Kelly, who says that a lot of cyclists are menaces and should face tougher penalties. Well, my goodness, why don't we turn to Dave Sherry first of all? Dave, what's the argument here in terms of cyclists not being held so accountable?
Well, we don't omit an omission. We don't require road tax or insurance. We're not considered a motorised vehicle under the Road Traffic Act, so that's a good start. You look at the facts and figures, vehicles kill more than cyclists, so...
But if a cyclist... But if a cyclist if a cyclist was cycling recklessly and unfortunately they killed a pedestrian by the way that they were cycling in a dangerous fashion, surely they should be held just as accountable as a driver who did the same.
Yeah, totally agree. You've got personal injury avenues, you've got reckless, dangerous cycling. Yeah, at the end of the day, if you hurt someone, you need to be held accountable. But on the risk and probability side, the more danger is vehicles. They're mainly going to kill.
Well, Danny, let's throw that to you. Look at the statistics. The number of people who have been injured by bicycles is negligible, whereas thousands of people are injured in car collisions.
Well, we have punishments for those thousands of people who are reckless behind the wheel and they injure or maim people. I think Dave's argument is a weak one in the sense that just because you don't produce any emissions, you shouldn't be held accountable. What we're talking about, Dave, is a tiny minority. You know, the vast majority of cyclists are considerate people. You know, they'll maybe sound their bell when they're cycling behind someone on a towpath or a footpath or a cycle path. We're talking about a tiny minority, Dave, who will just not give anybody an advance warning. And the first you know about it as a pedestrian is a blast of air as they go past you. Sometimes, Dave, even in excess of 20 miles an hour if they're on one of these battery-powered bikes. So I think we're talking about a tiny minority. And Dave, I've followed your story with great interest over the years. And you yourself were nearly killed by a trucker, and you wanted the law changing. And what I can't find, what I can't understand is if you look objectively about the whole story, Dave, is that all we're wanting is the same rules to apply to the guy who nearly killed you, to apply to people who are reckless on two wheels. And objectively, I can't come up with any reason as to why you personally wouldn't be an advocate of it.
All right, you've done your own work, so you know, I'm sitting on the fence. As you're aware, I'm a professional London bus driver, so I know about risks and dangers, but it's on the probabilities, yeah? I know what you're saying, but just not target cyclists, yeah, because we are vulnerable in the sense, as you're aware. I shouldn't be here today. But what I'm saying is, if you're going to do it for cyclists, let's do it for the horse riders, the individuals on illegal e-scooters, and let's do mobility scooters and whatever else uses the road. All road users.
Look, I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of anyone being mowed down by someone disabled doing 6 miles an hour on a scooter. What I am aware of are the 5 or 6 people killed every year by cyclists. Dave, I think, Dave, what we need to do is just concentrate on the story, which is cyclists, not horse riders and not disabled people.
Sorry, I suppose, Danny, is there an issue here if we're trying to regulate bicycles in the same way that we regulate cars? You're going to have to set up a new parallel DVLA. You're going to have little licence plates on bicycles. You're going to create a huge statist infrastructure for people that just pedal about. Is there a risk that you're going to get huge government overreach here?
Well, they try and behave like cars half the time.
I don't buy that for 1 second, Tom. We heard the scaremongering when the government banned smoking in pubs. We heard people say no one's ever going to go back to a boozer if you can't light up. It's a load of garbage.
Thousands of pubs are closing down. Thousands of them.
That's not to do with the smoking ban. We're talking about cheap booze from supermarkets. Now, you're conflating two stories here to prove one story. We're talking about the smoking ban where people were told that if you can't have a ciggy, you won't be able to go into a boozer. And that was just a fallacy. It's proven to be a fallacy. We're talking about a tiny minority of cyclists here. I wouldn't mind putting some sort of number plates on a bike. You know, you can do it with a smartphone. You can maybe capture it with some sort of code, and then you can upload it. It's not some sort of bureaucratic nightmare that you make.
Do I need to get a number plate for my 8-year-old who's cycling on a little stabilised bicycle? Do they need to register with the government?
No, now you're being ridiculous. We're not talking about 8-year-olds killing people. We're talking about grown men and women killing people.
How do you then make the distinction between who's going to kill someone and who isn't? How do you do that before the event?
You'd allow an 8-year-old on a bike on the road?
Yes, on a cycle path, absolutely. That's very common.
Well, yeah, but no one is being mowed down by 8-year-olds, are they, Tom? And you know this. You're being disingenuous. We're talking about people flying at 15, 16. In fact, there was a 28-mile-an-hour guy who killed a woman, and the police couldn't prosecute him because the speed restrictions didn't apply to cyclists. You know, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about 8-year-olds on 3-wheel scooters.
I mean, Dave, the fact is that there are, just as there are unscrupulous drivers, there are awful cyclists. I mean, I live in London. Cyclists don't sometimes go straight through the traffic lights when they should stop. They ignore pedestrian crossings a lot of the time. We've all witnessed this with our eyes. How are you supposed to, you know, hold them accountable for that type of behaviour, or is that acceptable if you're on 2 wheels and not 4?
Well, riding dangerously is not acceptable in anyone's book. Let's get the prima donnas out of the way, yeah?
Prosecute them. Prosecute
and how would you
them.
like to do that,
agree with me?
Have you got your number plates yet?
Well, look, the old bill can stop someone if they go through red lights. You don't need a number plate for that. Start prosecuting them. Reckless, dangerous driving, or riding, I should say. That's how you do it.
Is it not illegal for cyclists to go through red lights?
They don't get prosecuted.
Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Well, only a motor vehicle, because you're not going to get 3 points on a non-existent licence. The Road Traffic Act is designed for motorised vehicles, and a cycle is not a motorised vehicle, so technically they're not committing an offence. Don't forget, it's only an offence to cross a red light on a stop line. Majority of segregated cycle lanes are on a footpath adjacent to the stop line.
Look, if I may say, I think we are confusing the story here. The story is about reckless riding. If somebody wants to cycle through a red light and get hit by a car, they're not going to be the ones that are being prosecuted. It's their own damn fault. We're talking about pedestrians who are mown down by cyclists 20, 25 miles an hour, and they don't use their bell. They don't give any advance warning, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about 8-year-olds on tricycles. We're not talking about cycles going through red lights. We're talking about people being hit by bikes probably going 20 miles an hour, and that's what we're talking about.
OK, well, thank you very much to both of you. Dave Sherry, Britain's most hated cyclist, and, of course, Danny Kelly there, too, who's a motoring journalist. Strong stuff.
Yeah, strong stuff. I think, you know what? No one would argue if we just had more segregated paths, because then they don't get in the way of journalists.
I would, because where are you going to put them, Tom? You're going to remove the way where people can actually drive and get about on other vehicles.
Stop having 3-lane motorways. Have 2 not motorways, but
good
roads.
Good luck in our towns and cities with that, Tom.
Roads.
Good luck.
Yes, it's marvellous.
Anyway, NHS bosses are destroying the careers of whistleblowers who try to speak out about patient safety. That's according to some medics. We'll hear from the chair of the BMA very shortly.
It's 1:33. Good afternoon. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Sir Keir Starmer says all 6 pre-election pledges are fully funded and achievable within 2 terms of a Labour government. Among the promises are a new border security command to tackle people smuggling gangs, plans to cut NHS waiting lists and to improve economic stability. The government has called it another reset and says it's not a coherent plan. Britain has asked China to push for an end to Russia's war in Ukraine as Vladimir Putin visits Beijing. The Russian president was greeted by Xi Jinping with full military honours. It's their 3rd meeting in just over a year. China has long been suspected of supporting Russia's economy and its invasion of Ukraine. A man's been charged with attempted murder after Slovakia's Prime Minister was shot several times yesterday. The suspected attacker is a 71-year-old poet and former security guard. The Interior Minister says the attack was politically motivated. It comes after Robert Fico's government approved a proposal to crack down on press freedom by abolishing the country's public broadcaster. And Rishi Sunak has defended the government's controversial changes to sex education. The Prime Minister says parents should know what their children are being taught in schools, and sex ed should come at an appropriate time. The new proposals would ban it for children under the age of 9 and would recommend that the concept of gender identity is not part of the curriculum. GB News alerts available by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can also go to our website, gbnews.com.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a look at how the markets are. The pound buys you $1.2658, 1.1648 euros. The price of gold, £1,882.97 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,451 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some decent warm sunshine for many of us today, but also a spell of heavy, possibly thundery rain pushing its way westwards across central parts. That's in association with a frontal system that's currently just to the east of us. All this then making its way westwards, bringing some torrential downpours perhaps, and also the risk of some thunder. There will also be quite a few showers elsewhere, though across northern areas here it's looking a little bit drier and also quite a bit sunnier, with a good deal of sunshine, particularly across parts of Scotland. It's here we're likely to see the highest temperatures, highs of around 24 or 25 Celsius perhaps, though elsewhere it's going to be a few degrees lower than this. As we go into the evening, we are going to see more heavy rain across central parts of England and Wales. Could cause some problems on the road, so do take care. There's the potential for more than 40 millimetres of rain in just a few hours. Heading further north, though, across Northern Ireland, quite cloudy as we go through the evening. A few showery bursts here. A sunnier story for northern England and much of Scotland, though there will still be 1 or 2 showers around, and these could be a little bit on the heavy side. As we go through the end of the day and into the night, we are going to see the heavy rain across central England and Wales clearing away towards the west, and although there will be a few showery bursts overnight, for most it is going to be largely dry and there will be some clear skies. I'm not expecting temperatures to drop a huge amount, most places holding up in double digits, but there could be a few pockets of mist and fog first thing on Friday morning. Otherwise, as we go through Friday itself, then for many it's actually looking like a largely dry day. Yes, there will still be some showers around, particularly across parts of Scotland, and again here they could turn a little bit on the heavy side, but otherwise a largely dry picture, and again some decent sunshine breaking through. In the sunshine it's going to feel pretty warm. Temperatures a little bit higher than today for many of us, more widely getting into the low 20s Celsius. See you again.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Congestion east of Shrewsbury this afternoon for the eastbound side of the A5. Now it's closed from the A49 at Preston Island through towards the M54 at Wellington Junction 7 and queuing both ways. It's at the scene there of a collision. A52 between Kingsley and Frog Hall in Staffordshire is closed due to a lorry fire causing delays. M25 anti-clockwise. This queues after the Bell Common Tunnel. There was a breakdown there, but that's now being cleared. If you're heading for the westbound M20, slow going just away from junction 4 towards the M26, so away from Leybourne and Snodland. Now 2 lanes remain coned off there for an earlier car fire, and delays on Eurostar at the moment of up to an hour and 20 minutes, and St Pancras International at the moment as well. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1:39 in the afternoon, and NHS bosses have been accused of destroying the careers of whistleblowers who stand up to protect patients' lives. This is according to a Telegraph report today.
Yes, doctors claims they've lost their jobs with some suffering from extreme mental health issues, as reportedly bosses strive to bury any concerns. Well, the chair of the BMA, Professor Phil Banfield, stated today that doctors are being forced to choose between patient safety and their careers.
Yes, Health Secretary Victoria Atkins MP commented a little earlier.
The ability for professionals to report their concerns, to me, is a vital part of ensuring that our healthcare system meets the needs of patients and indeed of other staff members. And I understand that many of the reports that have rightly been focused on are several years in the making, as in they're perhaps a little bit more historical, since the steps that we have brought in. So, for example, NHS England has brought in freedom to speak up guardians in every health trust. What that means is there is a person whose responsibility it is to ensure that staff can report their concerns to this guardian so that they can then take action. We have also set up a confidential helpline for people who wish to report their concerns. And again, we know that that is not only being used by clinicians, but importantly, cases are being dealt with.
Well, that was the Health Secretary speaking a little earlier. Delighted to say that we're joined now in the studio by the chair of the BMA Council, Professor Banfield. Phil, thanks so much for joining us. I suppose the big question, the worry many people will have, is just how prevalent is this issue of doctors not feeling like they're able to speak up when there are issues?
Well, sadly, it's all too common. The BMA did a snapshot survey this year of 1,500 doctors, and 6 out of 10 of them almost said that they'd raised concerns over the last 12 months. Only 50%, just over 50%, had said that they were having their concerns addressed in any kind of detail, and only 6% said that their concerns had been addressed fully. Now, this is in the background, of course, of our having a duty to patients by the General Medical Council to report patient safety issues. And what we find is that when we report this, it's not the safety concern that's investigated, but the person raising those concerns. And that's a very unsafe place for the NHS to be.
It's quite incredible and also, dare I say, horrifying, really, if patient safety is being put at risk in this way. As a doctor or a nurse, it is your duty to call out where you see things that are going wrong within the NHS. I wonder, I read your article and you claim that perhaps, and correct me if I'm wrong, but NHS bosses essentially care about their reputation more than patient safety.
But what I can do is report what it feels like on the shop floor. So this is the everyday lived experience of doctors and nurses trying to make the health service a better place. Now, in reality, despite those concerns, we do an enormous amount of good work day in, day out, 24/7 across the whole year. So, the times at which that has a knock-on effect are relatively small. But you've only got to look at the Royal College of Emergency Medicine's concerns that they raised about delayed transfer of patients out of emergency departments into hospitals, where they've estimated that 260 patients a week die because of those delays. I mean, that's a scandal that the concerns of professionals and medical experts go unheeded.
And yet there have been all of these new initiatives in recent years, these freedom to speak up guardians now in every NHS trust, confidential helplines, all of these things. Is it not enough, or what needs more to be done to create an atmosphere more than anything else?
Well, what we need to do is to stop blaming the messenger here. We've got a situation where if you raise a concern, you are likely to be the person that's investigated rather than the concern, and we need a no blame culture like they have in the aviation industry. The difficulty with that, of course, is that sometimes you've got to uncover some uncomfortable truths about health organisations or the people running them. And there seems to be an awful lot of money spent protecting the reputation of these organisations that could be redirected, of course, into patient care.
Here's a very controversial solution. It's what the private sector does to stop whistleblowers and damage to firms being covered up. When someone leaves in scandal at the head of an organisation, they get what's known as a golden handshake. Lots and lots of money as a parting gift from the firm. It sort of means that the CEO of an organisation is not trying to cover up any scandal. If there's a scandal, they'll resign and it will be uncovered, but they'll get a hell of a lot of money to go. That's what the private sector does. It would be very uncomfortable to imagine giving a scandal-struck head of part of the NHS or the NHS money to leave. But is there anything in that?
Well, I mean, what we see all too often is that health service managers just move from one part of the organisation to another part. Health service managers are unregulated. One solution might be to introduce regulations so that they become responsible and actually carry the can for the decisions that they make to run unsafe services.
Yeah, I mean, Phil, just lastly, this was the most shocking example recently was with the Lucy Letby case, and I know that's historic to an extent, but the fact that whistleblowers tried to, tell the NHS management, tried to tell those higher up that something was going wrong, horrifically going wrong, and it took so long for that to then, end in some kind of action.
Well, of course, the difficulty with the Lucy Letby case and Chester is that, the threat of the General Medical Council was made to the doctors involved. There is no equivalent threat that you can use to an administrator or a health board. But, the repercussions of what's gone on in Chester are still going on today. So, we are seeing health boards and the behaviours of health boards and trusts around the country still taking precedent over patient safety.
So what would you like to see the government do now about creating... You mentioned more regulation. What shape would that take? It seems like this is a very tricky thing because it's based on culture within an organisation, perhaps more than anything more firm, more real.
Well, I'm a consultant in Wales, and my observation of the NHS in England is it's become unclear who is responsible and running the NHS in England because the day-to-day management is devolved down to trusts and these ICBs. There doesn't seem to be one person in charge, and I think that would.
And yet, if you'll let me. Wasn't the idea of that there's some sort of competition, that services get better? And, of course, the NHS in England has been performing better than the NHS in Wales.
Well, I'm not quite sure that that's true, but...
Waiting times are less in England than they are in Wales. Wales has seen a pretty tragic outcome in terms of the access to care, many people having to go to English hospitals just to get routine care.
Well, I think that's a debate for another day. But the difficulty with what's going on in England is the lack of openness and transparency. And as you say, it is a cultural issue here. You should want to know what's going on. If a patient or a member of staff says, this is a dangerous state of play to be in, then you shouldn't say, oh no, stop complaining. You should say, that's really interesting. We'll take ownership of that and we'll investigate it every time, just to make sure that what is going on actually is safe. It's very simple to do. It just involves a change of mindset.
And presumably the unions also, it is part of their job to try and protect these whistleblowers and make them sure that they know their rights and everything, guide them through whatever process there is. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time. Really, really interesting to get your perspective on this. Professor Phil Banfield, who is the chair of the BMA Council.
Well, today marks the 81st anniversary of those heroic dam busters who took that raid that took place during the Second World War. We're going to be hearing on the ground from the Netherlands from the memorial of some of those who fell during that raid. That's next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
Well, that has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you know, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, you know, times change, you've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1:52 in the afternoon, and we had a bit of a ding-dong, didn't we, earlier, about whether cyclists are a bit of a menace, or can be a bit of a menace, and whether they should get tougher punishments if they cause harm to pedestrians or potentially other motorists, I guess.
Yeah.
Other cyclists.
No, I do think there are two different types of cyclists, though. I think there are the mammals, who can be a nuisance, the middle-aged men in Lycra.
Or the ones on e-bikes.
And then everyone else. What I find really interesting, I went to Amsterdam a few times last year, and...
A few times?
Yeah, I got some friends out there, and...
Gosh.
No one wears a helmet. No one wears Lycra. Because you've got these segregated cycle lanes, and you can just cycle freely, safely, and it's not sort of this sort of head-down, running through lights, competitive thing that you see in London. It's just much more relaxed and normal.
Tom keeps making this comparison between Amsterdam and London.
Yeah.
And my argument is that London is absolutely not like Amsterdam in many ways. So you couldn't just completely transport their system to ours. But anyway, Keith says some cyclists seem and act entitled. It's usually the Lycra Brigade.
Yeah.
Yes, some people going into the city or going to their workplace, they try and race their time from yesterday. So of course they're not going to take as much care as, you know, Mrs. Miggins on her bike with a nice little basket.
Exactly. It's like they think they're in the Olympics. But Pete says cyclists must not film and report other road users for infractions. That's lower than the low. The same goes for all other road users. You're not the police, and it's not your job to police highways and byways.
Yes, a certain broadcaster likes filming what's going on the streets, doesn't it? Yes, some people are, you know, very nosy, perhaps. That's a nice way of putting it.
John says all cyclists should pay road tax, all cyclists should be insured, all cyclists should display a registration number either on the bike or the bib worn by the rider. What sort of authoritarian state are you trying to create here?
Well, why do motorists have to have all this?
Because they're driving 2-ton hunks of metal.
Well, have you seen some of these bikes? Vicious. Paul says cyclists can use mobiles, drink beer, go through red lights, ride on pavements, and police don't bother. There should be the same law applied to cycles as to cars.
I have to say, growing up in Cambridge, people would be stopped if they didn't have lights on their bicycles, and they'd be fined by the police.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in many cities, it's these e-bike things that you can rent that are the horror show. Pete says about 3 people are killed by cyclists each year. Lightning and cattle kill more people. Yes, but Pete, should we not still make sure that cyclists are cycling safely? Groucho Marx says, so Tom's a cyclist then. He can see through you. Yes, this is the thing. I drive, Tom doesn't. Tom cycles, I don't.
I don't have a bike in London, actually.
The fight.
I don't have a bike in London. But maybe I should. But of course,
Sharon
has failed to build all of these connected cycleways, so it's bad for everyone.
Sharon says most of the cyclists that ride push bikes bike like nutters, especially delivery riders who haven't read the highway code. They must obey the rules of the road, including not jumping red lights. Yes, it does anger me. Also, it is dangerous for blind people too. When they're trying to cross the road, they don't necessarily know that a bike could just come straight past.
Yeah, no, it's funny, but the RAC was actually founded by cyclists back in the early 90s.
Well, there you go. There's some more trivia.
Used to be a shared interest in smooth roads, and so the lobby groups for cyclists and cars were the same. They diverged recently.
Well, now, next, we're going to be speaking to the nephew of Melvin Dingy Young, one of the heroic dam busters. You won't want to miss it.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. A totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on the 16th of May.
It is indeed. Parasite outbreak. Panicked residents have been told to boil their water before drinking it due to contaminated taps. We're live in Devon to find out more.
Keir Starmer unveils not one, not two, not three, four. It's six steps on his pledge card to change Britain. But how does it have the power of Tony Blair's 5-step pledge card or Ed Miliband's 6-point stone of doom?
And a Just Stop Oil protester who sprayed Scotland Yard's famous sign with orange paint has been cleared of all criminal charges. The barrister went as far as to liken her to Rosa Parks. Is she an eco-protester or a civil rights campaigner?
It's extraordinary that people who can blatantly damage a building, vandalise something, end up being let off. I mean, are the laws not in the right place? Are the judges trying to make moral or political decisions rather than legal ones? What's going on?
Perhaps there's a little bit of morality in their play. I mean, the barrister, likening her to Rosa Parks, a black civil rights activist.
Oh, it's exactly the same.
I think it's a little bit much, don't you?
I think it's exactly the same. Clearly, the oppression faced by climate activists in this country today is exactly the same as black people in segregated America. I think that's exactly... Clearly, I can't see anything offensive about that comparison from the white protesters at all. I can't see anything offensive there.
And I wonder why they targeted Scotland Yard. Have they got extreme carbon emissions? Do they need to divest from oil and gas?
Last time I checked, the police have quite a few horses. I don't know if that's the issue. Maybe they want them to go back even further. Pre-industrial revolution.
Well, let us know what you think. Do you think being an eco-zealot, an eco-activist who sprays orange paint over Scotland Yard is, you know, the same as being a suffragist? Or much better, or Rosa Parks, indeed. Do you think?
Here's the thing: Rosa Parks was peaceful.
Yeah.
The suffragettes were violent. They killed people. They planted bombs. They blew things up. They tried to assassinate the Prime Minister. They were a nasty group.
Those pesky women.
The suffragists, on the other hand, they were the ones who actually won the vote for women. I mean, the suffragettes get painted through history as if they're the people who won the vote. They did not win the vote for women. The people that did violence did not win the vote for women. The vote for women passed through an Act of Parliament as a result of civic pressure from law-abiding people.
This is one of the things that annoys Tom the most, the difference between suffragette and suffragist and people not knowing it. So there you go. Let us know what you make of that decision to let her off, even though she sprayed Scotland Yard in orange paint. gbnews.com/your say. Let's get your headlines with Aaron.
Good afternoon. It's 2:03. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Sir Keir Starmer has claimed stability is change, and that's why it has to be Labour's first step. He's outlined a number of pre-election pledges, which include a new border security command to tackle the gangs behind small group boat crossings, cutting NHS waiting lists and a commitment to employ 6,500 new teachers. Labour also plans to set up Great British Energy, a publicly owned power company, and to crack down on antisocial behaviour. But Sir Keir says years of Conservative decline won't easily be undone.
There's no quick fix to the mess that the Tories have made of this country. But this is a changed Labour Party with a plan to take us forward. And I have ambition for this country. And like all ambition, that starts with first steps. First steps towards higher growth, an NHS back on its feet, secure borders, cheaper bills, safer streets and opportunities for your children.
However, the Conservative Party chairman, Richard Holden, says Labour's promises should be taken with a pinch of salt.
Quite clear that Labour don't have a cohesive plan and would take the country back to square one. I have no idea why anybody would believe a word that Keir Starmer says when every single time he's got a different audience to play for, he changes his tune, he changes what he's saying and changes what he says he stands for. You know, with 16 relaunches in a matter of a couple of years, after 4 years in opposition, he's not got a cohesive plan. I think it says everything you need to know about Keir Starmer.
South West Water has apologised for a waterborne disease outbreak in Devon after a parasite was found in a key reservoir. Residents in parts of Brixham and Alston were told to boil their drinking water yesterday after small traces of the parasite, Cryptosporidium, were found in the Hillhead Reservoir. The UK Health Security Agency says 22 people are confirmed to have the disease and as many as 70 other cases of diarrhoea and vomiting are under investigation. Junior doctors in England are holding fresh talks with the government in an effort to end their long-running dispute over pay. Since March last year, there have been a series of walkouts, with staff demanding a 35% pay rise, phased in over a number of years. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins says she's pleased the British Medical Association have agreed to the mediation.
But since I was appointed as Secretary of State in November, I've worked incredibly hard to try to tackle industrial action, because we know that in the last year it has led to some 1.4 million appointments being cancelled, and that has a real impact for patients. And so this is, I hope, a welcome step forward with the Junior Doctors Committee of the BMA to ensure that conversations about pay, but also working conditions, can happen in private.
The Prime Minister's defended the government's controversial changes to sex education. Rishi Sunak says parents should know what their children are being taught, and sex education should come at an appropriate time. The new proposals would ban it for children under the age of 9 and would recommend the concept of gender identity is not part of the curriculum. The Education Secretary says gender ideology should not be taught as fact.
We're also making it crystal clear that it should be transparent to parents, and parents should be able to see the materials. They are the first educators of their children, so they should be able to see what's also going on in school. And we're also on top of our gender questioning guidance, which we published for consultation earlier on. We're also making it very clear that gender identity is a contested view and should not be taught as fact.
A man's been charged with attempted murder after Slovakia's Prime Minister was shot several times yesterday. The country's Interior Minister says the attack was politically motivated and says the 71-year-old suspect had cited the government's policies on the media as a possible motive. Well, the shooting took place on the day Slovakia's parliament began discussing a plan to abolish the public broadcaster. Robert Fico is a known admirer of both Vladimir Putin and Hungary's authoritarian leader Viktor Orban, and he has scaled back support for Ukraine. Thousands of Slovakians have protested against his policies. And you can get more on all of our stories by scanning the QR code on your screen or going to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 2. Now, there is some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. Today is the 81st anniversary of the historic, heroic dambusters raid that took place during the Second World War.
Yes, and at a special memorial service to mark the occasion in the Netherlands, a moving rendition of The Last Post has just been played.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Let's cross to the Netherlands now and speak to our reporter, Will Hollis.
Yes, well, today 30,000 people or so walk up and down the beaches of Castricum on Zee, and they're passing a memorial stone dedicated to Dingy Young and his crew that never made it home during the Dam Buster raids. And I'm delighted to say that following the memorial service we've just seen, we're joined by Geoffrey Sturr, who is the nephew of Dingy Young. Just describe for me, Geoffrey, why was your uncle, the famous Dam Buster, called Dingy?
During his career, he ditched a plane not once but twice in the Channel, including one time when he was in a raft for 24 hours with his crew, and they happened to be rescued by a destroyer coming over from the U.S. under the Lend-Lease program. There's a Life magazine team that was on board, and they captured that story. So he was known as Dingy Young thereafter.
And he's celebrated today because of the courage that it took to go on the Dam Busters raids. He was the first team to breach the Myrna Dam, and it was over this beach that they were going back to England when they were shot down. What does it mean to you being here today and remembering your uncle and those lives lost?
It's tremendously moving, but I think one of the wonderful things about this event, if I may, is the connection that this community has to that event, the gratitude that the Dutch people have for the sacrifices that were made, the families of the crew who've traveled here with me and have come for other remembrances. And so that's, to me, is the best part about this, I think, is the living memory of the crew and its contribution and its sacrifice.
The wonderful thing about that time is that the Royal Air Force and the Dam Busters men were made up of not just British people, but people from across the Commonwealth. And your uncle, he was not just British, he was half American. Is that correct? Is that the genealogy?
He was a British citizen, but my grandmother was an American. Met my grandfather in California, married, came back to London, had children there. He spent part of his life growing up in California and then in Connecticut before coming back to the UK, attending Oxford and then volunteering for the RAF. So yes, there is that American connection.
The Dam Busters is a story that British children are taught about mainly by watching the film at Christmas. Is the Dam Busters a story that American people know and care about, or is that just because of your historical connection?
I think there is a great interest in the story because of the story, because of the novelty of what was attempted, the bravery, the raid and all of that. But there's great interest, I think, just generally in how Britain defended itself during the war, the Battle of Britain and things like that. So it's part of what I think people remember or know about Britain during the war years.
This was a fairly small service. There were local dignitaries, people from the Royal Air Force who cycled all the way from Lincolnshire in England to be here. There are people from the Dutch Air Service. There were people from the International Bomber Command Center. But you were here as well after flying in from Arizona in America. Why did you want to make such a long trip for a memorial service for, quite rightly, an uncle that you never actually met?
Oh boy, he's been part of my life, I think, since I grew up, and so I've always known of the story of his life. He was an inspiration to my mother, who was the youngest of three, and we first came here in 2018 for the dedication of the memorial and made the connections that I was just describing to the families, to the Dutch family that caused this memorial to be created. I was here then with my late wife and my daughter. My son couldn't make it, and I'm happy that he's with me today because he happens to bear a little bit of a resemblance to my uncle.
This year, we're remembering the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. There are some veterans left from that campaign. There are sadly no men of 617 Squadron that flew the Dam Busters raid alive anymore. Why is it important for you to keep the memory of the Dam Buster raid alive?
I think the sacrifice that they made, and everyone else who was involved in Bomber Command, it's important to remember. They were young, they were dedicated, they were fearless, and they endured tremendous sacrifice in defending Britain. And it's important to remember that. It's also important to remember the costs of war on both sides and the consequences of war. Particularly, and in this country, That's what the Dutch do so well, is to remember the sacrifices and why it's important to remember them to fight for the freedoms that they have today.
The average age of the dam busters from across 617, led by Wing Commander Guy Gibson, was just 21 years old. From this 7, the air crew that served with your uncle, the youngest was 20 years old. It's the ultimate sacrifice, isn't it?
It is, indeed, indeed. My uncle's 27.
27 years old. That's younger than I am. It's such an incredible age to give everything. What does that mean to you, knowing that a small part of your history played such a big role in the Second World War?
I'm just grateful and honored by their sacrifice. And I'm particularly happy and honored that IBCC has taken this effort to remember them. I think the ride from Digby was a wonderful way to remember. It's an act of athletic prowess to have endured the rides that they did, which is exactly what that raid involved, to fly at night for 6 hours, piloting an Avro Lancaster. Was a feat of great athleticism. And my uncle was an athlete in himself. He was on the Oxford team that beat Cambridge in 1938, if I'm not mistaken. So there's kind of a special connection there. So.
Jeffrey Sturr, all the way from Arizona, the nephew of Dingy Young, who led the Lancaster crew that didn't make it past the North Sea and back to England. We want to reference, first of all, that the silhouettes that you might have seen earlier have now been taken down. They've been taken down because they're going back with the Royal Air Force, because they're going to be auctioned off in memory of those men, but also to raise funds for the International Bomber Command Centre, because they're going to be using that money towards a new learning centre so that the next generation of children can learn about the dam busters and the men and women of Bomber Command.
Oh, absolutely fantastic stuff. So necessary as well. Will Hollis, thank you so much for bringing us all of that live from the Netherlands.
What a fantastic interview.
Yeah. Really
Hearing
moving.
from that man, Jeffrey Sturr. Really, really fascinating. That was brilliant. We're going to move on, though, to some domestic politics, because Keir Starmer, is he the man to save Britain? He certainly wants us to think so. The Labour leader today claimed that decline is not inevitable, as he made his party's pitch to the country ahead of this year's general election.
Well, among Labour's pledges are now a new security border command, which some people say is just a rejigged command that already exists. But this is about tackling people smuggling gangs. Pledging to cut waiting lists is in there too, but also a recruitment of teacher pledge.
Yes, lots in there. The Labour leader insists all of these commitments are fully costed. But the Conservatives have, of course, hit back, saying Starmer is on his 16th relaunch and has no coherent plan, although Rishi Sunak's had a few too, hasn't he?
Well, let's discuss this further now with the political commentator, Peter Spencer. Now, Peter, you'll remember the 2015 Edstone, as it was known, where Ed Miliband sort of stood up and had all of his pledges there cast into rock. Didn't really quite go so well for him. They were attacked as being a little bit vague. I think we can read on there, an NHS with time to care was one of those pledges. What on earth does that mean? I'm not quite sure. But, of course, more successful in this ilk was Tony Blair's pledge card. Perhaps that's more similar to what Keir Starmer is doing today. How does it shape up with leaders of Labour's past?
I think it is much closer to the Tony Blair analogy than it is to the Miliband one. And I can see the point of it, that simply that all the polls tell us quite clearly that the country is, or the bulk of the country, it would seem, is fed up to the back teeth with the Tories, but they haven't really fallen in love with Labour and sort of, well, what's he about then? What's all that Starmer bloke? What's he want then? And forgive my relapse into the East of Mayfair stuff.
Go for it.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, right then. I mean, not all that many people, frankly, let's get real here, will have actually watched the speech and taken naked notes or whatever. But what they will see over the coming weeks are these stonking great billboards with Keir Starmer there with his sleeves rolled up, which is actually, that was something David Cameron was rather fond of, the sleeved rolled up image. So what he's trying to present is, look, the Tories have made a mess. I rolled up my sleeves. I'm going to fix stuff.
Peter, do you think this is a change that was perhaps inspired by what happened at the Labour Party conference last year? Keir Starmer was attacked by a man dousing him with glitter. He took off his jacket, he rolled up his sleeves, he got on with the speech. We're starting to see a lot more of a jacketless, sleeves rolled up Keir Starmer. Could that have been the inspiration?
It probably played a part. I suppose he can but hope, actually, in this context, that the Prime Minister doesn't decide to hold the election right back until the winter, because I think it'd be a bit parky going out there with in his shirt sleeves with no jacket on. But I mean, what this is clearly it's a preliminary skirmish in the election campaign, and I note that he's put the economy top of his list, which of course resonates with the whole cost of living crisis thing, and he has put the NHS second, because first of all people are concerned about the pound in their pocket, and second they're concerned about the hospital up the road, so all that makes perfect sense. He has put in the small boats thing, as you pointed out, Tom, and I think that is to do with the fact he would rather like to get those 45 red war constituencies that's switched over to Boris Johnson to come back, and he's hamstrung by the fact he doesn't know when the election's going to be, obviously, point one. Point two, he also doesn't want to give too much detail in case he comes up with a really cracking good idea and the Tories nick it.
Yes, I mean, he has got the 6 main things, I imagine. The economy, NHS, border security, energy. Of course, lots of people are very miffed about the cost of their energy bills. Antisocial behaviour, another one. Parking their lawns on the Conservatives' turf, eh? Thank you, Peter. We're going to have to leave it there because we've run out of time. Political commentator Peter Spencer.
Well, coming up, the COVID inquiry is set to become the most expensive inquiry in history. Is this a good use of taxpayers' money? That next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sam Richardson is a singer-songwriter from St Agnes in Cornwall. Much of his music reflects a sense of frustration with life in a coastal town.
We've got a lot of empty shops in a lot of our town centres, which is sort of causing a lot of death on the high street. I know that's a problem everywhere.
Similar problems across the border in Devon. Ilfracombe is the most deprived area in North Devon. Twice the town has applied for levelling up funding. Twice it's been turned down, something North Devon MP Selene Saxby says is frustrating.
It's very complicated. It's not as straightforward as just throwing money at the problem. They're very deep issues.
For several years, the government has acknowledged that rural areas need extra help, but so far that help doesn't stretch to our coasts. The MP for St Austell and Newquay is pushing the government to change all this.
Truly local people are finding it really challenging because we often have sort of low-wage seasonal work, but very high house prices pushed up because of second homes and holiday lets, etc. And also, I think the disparity review that Theresa May carried out when she was Prime Minister highlighted that working-class white boys in coastal communities are some of the most disadvantaged people in the country.
Struggling to get on the housing ladder, struggling to find work, struggling to be heard.
It's interesting that a member of the party that's in government recognises that, which is great, because it is a really important thing. But that government, for the last 10 years, has also cut £500 million in youth services around the country.
No one thinks the problem of coastal deprivation can be solved overnight. The issue of disaffected young white males even harder.
Friday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Lee Anderson's Real World at 7. At 8, it's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:24. Now, South West Water has urged people to boil their tap water after hundreds were struck down with diarrhoea, vomiting...
Emily, your fiance's joined us.
Oh, my goodness. No, it's not Patrick Christie's
Well, you know
tonight
what?
yet.
He can do with... You know what? We're glad to provide him with the promotion, but we'll continue anyway. Now,
we were talking about something very serious, that hundreds of people have been drinking this water that seems to contain a parasite, and they're having the most awful stomach pains, and this is all happening in a seaside town in Devon.
Yes, it's in Brixham, where residents are being told to boil water as a precaution, including when drinking it or using it to cook with or brush their teeth. Let's cross to Jeff Moody now. It's nice to see that Good Afternoon Britain's back behind us. Let's cross to Jeff, who is there on the scene of a water operation.
Yes, absolutely. People are still queuing for miles to get in here to collect their bottled water. In the last half an hour, we've heard from the MP for Totnes, Anthony Mangnall, who says that he had a meeting with South West Water this morning, and he says he has identified the problem. Now, we have to just say that nothing has come so far from South West Water, but the local MP is saying that they have told him that it is a faulty air valve. Now, what that means is that animal waste and contaminated groundwater has been able to get through that air valve into the system. Now, we don't know exactly where that air valve was. If it was by the reservoir itself, that means that up to 40,000 people in the area could be drinking traces of animal waste. If it's more locally sourced, then again, that's 16,000 people within this area. So whichever way you cut it, that's an awful lot of people that are finding themselves sick now. We're hearing that hundreds of people are sick. They're violently sick. They're getting severe cases of diarrhoea. They're also, when the diarrhoea passes, the stomach pains are so intense that some people have been describing it like childbirth. Local schools are closed down, cafes and restaurants are closed down, and it isn't just a virus that affects the elderly or the vulnerable, it affects children too, and it also affects pets. We're hearing of cats and dogs who are being sick as well. I've been talking to some of the people who are in the queue this morning to fetch their water. They're pretty annoyed with South West Water because it took them so long to tell people not to drink the water. Here's what they've been saying to me.
I was already poorly anyway, and the kids, we've got quite a big family of children, so I've just come to collect for my daughter and for myself. Yeah, so 2 separate households. So that's 8, 9, 10 people altogether.
This is a fantastic piece of organisation, and hopefully we'll get through it as quickly as possible as soon as they identify the cause of the problem.
And the danger, of course, is that this can spread because it can be transmitted from human to human, also from human to animal and animal to human. So anybody that has been in the area in South Devon on holiday over the last few days and has then gone away, gone back home again, further into the country, could well be infecting others. So this could turn out to be incredibly serious indeed.
Much indeed, Jeff Moody, who's there in Brixham in Devon. Rather worrying for residents, of course. Really great to get that insight. Everyone's queuing up for their bottled water, so they should.
Some people more stoically than others. I did enjoy that last man that Jeff interviewed there, saying, well, of course it's early, let's hope they find the problem and we'll just get on. It's very keep calm and carry on attitude.
But yes, I imagine for, well, as Jeff said, for infants and elderly people in particular, getting this parasite in your water is absolutely, well, could be pretty disastrous for your health. So we'll keep an eye on it. We'll keep an eye on it.
Certainly. Well, there's lots more coming up in the programme, not least one of our big bugbears today about these eco-protesters seemingly getting off with criminal damage.
Well, it is criminal damage, surely.
Well, you'd think, but then again, I'm not a judge. I'm not a lawyer.
Well,
perhaps our judges know far better than us ordinary
I mean,
folk.
from what I can see, a young woman took it upon herself to spray Scotland Yard with orange paint. There she is. She looks very angry indeed. She's standing outside it, presumably proud of what she's done.
So you would be desperate to be arrested.
But imagine, I mean, someone wrote in saying, because the barrister said that she's, comparable to Rosa Parks, the black civil rights activist. But presumably, if you went round and sprayed the lawyer's house in orange paint, you'd be done for criminal damage. No? So Scotland Yard, it doesn't matter?
Well, this is what's so baffling. I want to know on what terms was she let off and what moral hazard is there now for anyone to go around and spray any building they like with any sort of paint that they like.
It's soft touch Britain. We'll get to the details very shortly. But coming up, we'll have the latest pictures of Prince William and Queen Camilla because they've been out and about today. We'll tell you where. But first, the headlines with Aaron.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 2:30 exactly. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Sir Keir Starmer says all 6 pre-election pledges are fully funded and achievable within 2 years of a Labour government. Among the promises are a new border security command to tackle people smuggling gangs, plans to cut NHS waiting lists and improve economic stability. The government has described it as another reset and says it's not a coherent plan. Britain's asked China to push for an end to Russia's war in Ukraine as Vladimir Putin visits Beijing. The Russian president was greeted by Xi Jinping with full military honours for their 3rd meeting in just over a year. China has long been suspected of supporting Russia's economy and its invasion of Ukraine. A man's been charged with attempted murder after Slovakia's Prime Minister was shot several times yesterday. The suspect attacker is a 71-year-old poet and former security guard. The country's Interior Minister says the attack was politically motivated. It comes after Robert Fico's government approved a proposal to crack down on press freedom by abolishing the country's public broadcaster. And South West Waters apologised for a waterborne disease outbreak in Devon after a parasite was found in a key reservoir. Residents in parts of Brixham and Alston were told to boil their drinking water yesterday after small traces of the parasite, Cryptosporidium, were found in the Hillhead Reservoir. The UK Health Security Agency says 22 people are confirmed to have the disease and as many as 70 other cases of diarrhoea and vomiting are under investigation. Well, I'll be back with more at the top of the next hour. You can get more now by scanning the QR code on your screen for GB News alerts.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some decent warm sunshine for many of us today, but also a spell of heavy, possibly thundery rain pushing its way westwards across central parts. That's in association with a frontal system that's currently just to the east of us. All this then making its way westwards, bringing some torrential downpours perhaps, and also the risk of some thunder. There will also be quite a few showers elsewhere, though across northern areas here it's looking a little bit drier and also quite a bit sunnier with a good deal of sunshine, particularly across parts of Scotland. It's here we're likely to see the highest temperatures, highs of around 24 or 25 Celsius perhaps, though elsewhere it's going to be a few degrees lower than this. As we go into the evening, we are going to see more heavy rain across central parts of England and Wales. Could cause some problems on the road, so do take care. There's the potential for more than 40 millimetres of rain in just a few hours. Heading further north, though, across Northern Ireland, quite cloudy as we go through the evening. A few showery bursts here. A sunnier story for northern England and much of Scotland, though there will still be 1 or 2 showers around, and these could be a little bit on the heavy side. As we go through the end of the day and into the night, we are going to see the heavy rain across central England and Wales clearing away towards the west, and although there will be a few showery bursts overnight, for most it is going to be largely dry and there will be some clear skies. I'm not expecting temperatures to drop a huge amount, most places holding up in double digits, but there could be a few pockets of mist and fog first thing on Friday morning. Otherwise, as we go through Friday itself, then for many it's actually looking like a largely dry day. Yes, there will still be some showers around, particularly across parts of Scotland, and again here they could turn turn a little bit on the heavy side, but otherwise a largely dry picture, and again some decent sunshine breaking through. In the sunshine it's going to feel pretty warm. Temperatures a little bit higher than today for many of us, more widely getting into the low 20s Celsius. See you again.
The latest GB News travel.
Hi, good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Still queues away from Shrewsbury this lunchtime. Eastbound A5 is shut from the A49 to the M54 junction 7 and queuing. That's due to a collision, so routes around M Street and Preston Island really struggling as traffic diverts. There's queues in South Wales as well for the eastbound M4. The junction 29 is the back end of the queue towards the Brynglas Tunnel, so towards junction 26 there was a collision just before the Brynglas Tunnels. All vehicles on the hard shoulder but still very slow going. Luton northbound M1 junction 10 up to 11. The inside lane is coned off. A lorry and a car involved in a bump there. It's in the roadworks, so slow going. And on Eurostar, we're currently seeing delays of up to 15 minutes at the moment at St Pancras International this lunchtime. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:35. Now, the COVID inquiry is set to become the most expensive in history. The investigation into the pandemic is said to have already cost the taxpayer a staggering £94 million. Wow.
That could buy, I don't know, 1 year of Gary Lineker, couldn't it?
A few houses in South Ken.
But the cash keeps rolling. The final report is not expected to be produced until the end of 2026, which would mean that the projected cost of this inquiry is set for a mind-blowing £200 million in total.
It's a lot of money, isn't it? Is it worth it? Joining us is the head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Keck. Now, the Taxpayers Alliance led this research. Elliot, £300,000 a day over the last year. A staggering amount of money. How does it compare to previous investigations we've had of this type?
Oh, listen, it's far, far higher. The only one that comes close is the inquiry into child sex abuse, but that went on for about double the amount of time. When you look at the total inquiry, the other really concerning thing is that these costs are actually accelerating. So if you look from the start in summer 2022, the average cost, the average spending has been £136,000 a day. But in the latest financial year, it was £200,000 a day. You then add to that the cost to the civil service, i.e. not the COVID inquiry, but to the civil service of, for example, preparing witnesses and preparing evidence, and that's an additional £100,000 a day. So these costs are spiralling completely out of control.
Impacted by inflation
but
well.
Elliot, who's getting all this money? Is it going to lawyers? I mean, where's it going?
So listen, that's a very good question. So if you look at the £94 million spent so far, roughly half is going towards legal costs, so another £15 million towards operational costs. And interestingly, there's about £9.5 million towards a project called Every Story Matters, which is where essentially the COVID inquiry goes on tour to speak to individuals about their experiences of COVID. I think that's a very noble thing to do. But ultimately, is that really why we want this inquiry? Don't we want this inquiry fundamentally to get to the bottom of what went wrong and what should have happened instead?
Sounds like an art project more than... Yeah. I mean, surely... Yeah, an inquiry should be about decisions that were made in government. I mean, yes, it matters how it affects people. That's not going to affect... I mean, hearing someone be very sad about what happened is not going to affect sort of how we prepare for the next thing.
Yeah, listen, the inquiry should be about fundamentally, was the government prepared for the pandemic? Did it respond in the correct way? Was it right for the government to take away our most basic liberties with almost no scrutiny for about a year and a half without any, as I said, public scrutiny or real public debate, despite the fact that actually our death rate was by no means the best in Europe or the best in the world? And I think, unfortunately, that's not what the inquiry has been focusing on. And when we're landed with a bill of potentially £200 million, or at the moment it could have to say be even more, I think there's going to be real questions about what we're actually getting for this.
We've got two issues really running in parallel. The cost of this all and whether it's actually going to find out what we all want it to find out, or at least examine those issues. I'm reading here that Lord Savile of Newdigate, who carried out the Bloody Sunday inquiry, said this is a necessary expense. He says it's got to be thorough, it's got to be fair, this takes time and expertise, that's expensive. He says he has deep sympathy for the inquiry, and he says he wouldn't be surprised if it costs more than his one. Do you have any sympathy with that this requires perhaps not £300,000 a day, but it's going to cost a lot of money?
Oh, listen, of course it's going to cost money. These things will always cost money. But listen, I've watched enough of the COVID inquiry and read enough about the COVID inquiry to know that mostly it's been a political pantomime. And I think that's completely inappropriate. It's actually, I find, it's insensitive to the victims themselves. And ultimately, it means that we're not going to learn anything. And if something like this happens again, we're going to reach for the same reactive and tired solutions that we did last time.
Earlier, I went along to the COVID inquiry and sat there for Dominic Cummings giving evidence. I found it extraordinary, the amount that they focused on how many men were in number 10. Was there sort of a sort of a two male-led team that led to all of this?
WhatsApp messages.
And being rude on WhatsApp messages and swearing as if that doesn't happen in every government ever. And Dominic Cummings sat there saying, sorry, can we talk about the systems of management here? Can we talk about the dates of who said what and when? And they said, no, we want to talk about your sweary WhatsApps. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, and listen, as I said, the taxpayers' lines at the moment are estimating it will be £200 million. That's based on extrapolating a cost per day so far. But as we've discussed, that cost per day is accelerating, which means that if it continues to accelerate, that £200 million could actually look like quite a serious underestimate.
Yeah, a huge amount of money, a huge expense. And I imagine not all of the British public are signed up to the benefits of this. Anyway, thank you, Elliot Keck from the Taxpayers Alliance, who looked into these extraordinary expense. Shall we speak to Martin Dobney, because he is up next at 3 o'clock to get a little insight, a little taster of what's to come. Martin, what's coming up?
Fabulous show, guys. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to sell my show. We've got a sit-down interview with Sir Keir Starmer in the show. Today, he launched his 6-step plan. Will it allow him to take strides towards Downing Street, or will his list sink like the Edstone? Plus, in Dublin yesterday, dramatically, there was an assassination attempt on the politician who's led the Ireland is Full campaign, pushing back against record asylum seeking and immigration in the country. We'll have a proper update on how politics in Ireland has become so divided and toxic. Plus, holy smoke, what in God's name is London Mayor Sadiq Khan doing visiting the Pope? And while he's there, will he slap an Ulez fine on the Pope mobile? That's all coming up 3 till 6.
I'm glad you're covering that, Martin, because, yeah, I was wondering myself, what on earth is he doing at the Vatican?
Isn't the Pope mobile electric? I know, so, well, I guess we'll find out. Don't
spoil the joke, Tom.
It's a great joke. It's a great joke. Yeah. I very much enjoyed it. Well, Martin Dobney, thank you so much. We'll see you in around 15 or 20 minutes' time. But, of course, this Just Stop Oil protester who sprayed Scotland Yard's famous sign with that orange paint, well, she's been cleared of criminal charges. We're going to be joined by one of their activists to explain what on earth is going on.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Between 1955 and 1989, an average of 55 nuclear tests were conducted across the globe each year. More than 30,000 young British and Commonwealth servicemen served at British test locations in Australia and the Pacific Ocean. But in the years since, those who were involved say they've been ignored and lied to about their exposure to radiation. For decades, Lab Rats International has represented the millions across the world exposed to fallout from the testing programmes and the families who still suffer today from illness and deformities. Last year, the government unveiled the Nuclear Test Medal, recognising the military, civilian and overseas staff and personnel who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme in the 1950s. But for Lab Rats founder Alan Owen, whose own father was a nuclear test veteran, the work is only just beginning. In September, they launched a legal challenge to the Ministry of Defence, to provide the test veterans full medical records, which they say they've been denied access to.
We sit in this bubble as the nuclear test veteran community, fighting against the establishment. And they will say, you know, ministers will go in Parliament and say, all you've got to do is apply for your medical records and they'll give them to you. You know, it just doesn't happen. It's not a reality. They're not there to as easy, as accessible as just applying. They will fight you all the way. They will delay it.
In response, a government spokesperson said, "We are grateful to all service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme, which is why we have formally recognised them with an official medal. Nuclear test veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pension Scheme. The fight for these veterans and their families lives on, because thousands who came before never got the recognition and justice for their service."
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:45 and the Royals are out in force today. Yes, the Prince of Wales has spoken this afternoon at an event to celebrate global efforts to tackle antimicrobial resistance and build stronger health systems, food security and climate resilience.
Yes, it comes as Queen Camilla visited Lamb House in East Sussex to join a garden party with organisations in celebration of Rye's renowned literary history. There she is. Shame about the weather, yes. Well, we can't change that, can we?
Joining us now is royal correspondent Cameron Walker to talk about this increase in... It feels like there's been a lot more royal events. I suppose it is sort of the season for it. But my goodness, quite a lot of activity.
Yeah, there certainly is, Tom. Very British weather, as you probably saw there. Buckingham Palace has also announced that the King and Queen are going to be visiting the Chelsea Flower Show this year as well, so another event in the royal calendar to add. But Prince William was talking about a very serious topic this afternoon, and that was about what he sees and many see as the rise of antimicrobial resistance, which is a huge mouthful, isn't it? But basically, I see this as a bit of a situation where the British government is using Prince William as a power tool of soft diplomacy. So the reason he's been talking about this is because The Lancet shows that almost 5 million people die every single year across the world from causes associated with antimicrobial resistance. So, for example, if you're given an antibiotic, sometimes those that disease inside you does not get killed by the antibiotic because they become resistant to it. And that's what Prince William wants to raise awareness of, and what he has been raising awareness of today is predicted that by 2050, so 25 years' time, that global death toll each year will rise to 10 million. So in a speech today in London, he called for unity and action on this issue. It comes as the government's pledged £85 million to support international community in tackling this growing threat. I also understand that Prince William has kind of, although it's the first time he's spoken about this thing publicly today, behind the scenes, it has been a growing concern of his. He, of course, was an RAF search and rescue pilot. He was an air ambulance pilot as well for East Anglia, and he saw how antibiotics and similar medical things can really help, but also the rising threat of this problem. So Prince William, a bit on the war footing, as it were, on this particular global issue today.
And Queen Camilla, she's giving up the fur.
She's giving up the fur, yes. Although she stopped wearing fur in 2017, actually, Emily. But it's been officially confirmed by Buckingham Palace as speaking to the animal rights group PETA, that she is no longer going to buy any fur items. The late Queen Elizabeth II did something very similar as well. Today, of course, she's been getting wet at the garden party, but before that, she was also in East Sussex at the Charleston Festival, one of the oldest, longest-running even, literary festivals in the country, speaking to school children about the importance of reading. She sees it, that's one of her life's work, really, trying to encourage young people and adults to read and how that can really improve your life chances going forward. She was doing that too.
A great British photo there. Queen Camilla
well,
in the
Cameron
rain.
Walker, thank you very much for joining us and updating us on those issues. But to move on, a Just Stop Oil activist who spray-painted the famous Scotland Yard sign with orange paint has been cleared of criminal damage charges.
Yes, the activist, Laura Johnson's barrister, went so far as to, believe it or not, liken her to civil rights campaigner Rosa Parks.
Well, joining us now is Just Stop Oil spokesperson Adrian Johnson. And Adrian, do you see yourself as a civil rights activist?
Thank you so much for having me on, Tom and Emily, to speak to you and your viewers about this really important story. If I could talk about what happened in the court, as you quite rightly say, she was acquitted. She got full acquittal. She was found not guilty by a jury of her peers who listened to the evidence for almost a week, really, and decided in less than an hour that she had a legal excuse for the action that she took, because they decided that the action was peaceful. They decided that the damage was not significant, and importantly, they came to the conclusion that convicting Laura would be a disproportionate interference with her right to the freedom of expression, which is a massively important point.
So if it's not serious damage,
country.
I can come and paint your house?
Yeah.
If you had a legal excuse for doing so, you'd be most welcome to do that. But you would need to establish in a court of law, as Laura did last week, that you have a valid reason for doing it.
So I really passionately believe that the economy would grow faster if we had lower taxes. I think more people would be better fed. I think we'd have less poverty. Can I just come and write tax cuts on your house?
So you would need to be taking action against the government, right? Which is exactly what Laura Johnson did in this case.
That's what I would be doing. I'd be writing tax cuts on your house, saying, I think that's what we need.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation to be having, but you would agree that my house has got nothing to do with the government. And that's the whole point here. Back in 2019, the Metropolitan Police were given overwhelming evidence that our government are committing crimes against humanity. Now, they haven't acted on that evidence. If they were to open up these investigations, our government would change their policies and we would not need to be taking action of the kind that Laura Johnson did back in 2022.
Adrian, do you see why this might worry some people? Clearly, this jury decided that she's been acquitted, no criminal charges, no criminal conviction anyway. But if everyone just did this because of the cause that they felt passionate about, we'd live in quite a dangerous place. I mean, if someone put orange paint all over my workplace, I'd probably feel, at the very least, intimidated. And surely this is criminal damage. I mean, we can't just all go around spraying orange paint. It seems ludicrous to me, rather entitled.
Yeah, I fully understand. That's a really good point. And I would reassure your viewers, and yourselves for that matter, that they have no need to worry because we live in a country that has fantastic laws and legal protection. However, Laura was taking this action because, and she was doing this in support of law and order and the rule of law. And she did say in her press release,
I would like to Adrian.
I would like to, no, it's completely connected, isn't it? I would like to ask the Met Police, who are they there to serve and protect? The good people of this country or our oil-corrupted government? I would like to ask them how they are planning to police the mass hysteria, the panic, the fear, the looting, the theft, the hoarding and the inevitable violence that will result when our shelves are empty and we cannot feed our children.
You're saying this is as if it's a fact. Of course, we know that as time has gone on, actually as the climate's got less conducive to better farming. Technology has improved. There's more food being produced today than there has at any point in human history. Everyone, I think, can accept that the climate is changing, that human activity is contributing hugely towards that climate change. But that doesn't mean that we're going to have bare shelves in this country. And to state that as a statement of fact seems like it's a peculiar position to take. It's not one, for example, that the UN has arrived at.
Tom, it is what the UN have arrived at. That's exactly the warnings that they're giving us. And
The
Tom,
UN hasn't said we're going to have famines in the United Kingdom.
They are, because we're going to find it increasingly difficult to grow food. Tom, I would ask you to put your lack of concern about farming to our farmers. They are literally struggling to make ends meet. And they are, you know for a fact that we had the wettest year, the wettest 18 months on record. They were not able to plant potatoes in Ireland. Come on, we're going to run out of food.
That doesn't mean we're going to run out of food. That really doesn't. What that means is that new technology is being used, even though there was a difficult year for potatoes this year. More food was produced around the world than ever before, because you find ways around this sort of stuff. I guess I've got a more optimistic view and you've got a more disastrous one. I'm so sorry, I'm being counted down. We've got to end it. But thank you, Adrian Johnson, so much for coming on and talking us through. That's the end of the show.
And we get into potatoes. From just a bowl to potatoes.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It will turn mostly dry overnight and it will be dry for many of us tomorrow. But before then, we do have some heavy rain around at the moment, currently across central parts. That's been driven by an area of low pressure that is pushing its way westwards, and that's then pushing the heavy rain westwards as we go through the end of the day. So it is going to clear away, but before then, we could have some heavy rain, particularly as we go through this evening's rush hour, could cause some problems on the road. Otherwise, we are likely to see most places turning dry overnight, although just a few spots of rain where the clouds thick enough across some northern parts of England perhaps. There will be some clear skies, but temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, so for many it is going to be a relatively mild start to the day on Friday morning, minimum of around 11 and 12 Celsius for most places. If we look at the details for tomorrow morning and across Scotland, it's a largely fine start. Plenty of sunshine here, though perhaps towards the Western Isles a bit more cloud and some outbreaks of rain. Also a bit more cloud across southern parts of Scotland and into Northern Ireland and Northern England too, and this cloud could bring a few outbreaks of rain first thing tomorrow morning, but nothing especially heavy. Heading further south across the rest of England and Wales, lots of fine sunny weather to be had, but some mist and fog patches possible across parts of the southeast. Any mist and fog, though, will quite quickly clear tomorrow morning, and for many, tomorrow actually looks like a largely fine day. Yes, there will be some showers around, but these will be quite hit and miss, so most places are likely to avoid them. But the showers across parts of Scotland, particularly central Scotland, could turn heavy and possibly thundery. With some decent sunshine around, temperatures for many are likely to be a